All right. So there's someone out there whom I owe some screen time to. In fact, there's several people that I owe screen time to, but this person has leapfrogged to the front of the line for several reasons. One of which being during our initial exchange of mudslinging via the YouTube comments thread a few episodes back, while getting my ass handed to me, I realized how brilliant this guy was, and I wanted to give him the floor. And we did an interview, and I want to make it very clear because this guy has accused me of taking sandbagging and taking so long because I'm editing out the stuff that makes me look bad in favor, so that I look good and that I come out as like winning the argument or at least not losing it as bad. First of all, I don't think I lost the argument. There are parts of it that I was taken off guard and didn't have an answer for, but to use an analogy, I'm a much better lyricist than I am a freestyle rapper. But anyways, even though there are parts of the interview where I was getting my ass handed to me as well, I had one of the reasons why I'm taking so long is I'm sitting here. I'll show you. Look at this. Okay, so to start here, every single gap you see here is because I had to cut out incredibly loud background noise. He was like walking a dog down a highway or something. And so I have to like go through the entire episode and fade in. Like you can see, every one of these has a little fade in and fade out kind of situation that I had to add there. The little yellow line constitutes the fade in and fade out. So every single time I had to do that. But then also the thing that's taken me the longest is, you see these little markers here? See how it says marker 36? I have gone through and marked different areas where there are flaws in the argument that I'm like, no, like either his argument was flawed or it wasn't complete and I wasn't thinking straight because, again, I'm a much better lyricist than I am a freestyler. And so it's taken me a long time. Now, should I have done this after the episode was released? You could argue that, but I'm going to say, hell no. I'm not going to release something until I know what I'm releasing, right? And so, and by the way, this is me. That's him, right? I'm the green. He's the purple. I am not editing out content. I did not have to even give this guy the floor to begin with, y'all. I could have buried all those comments. I'm the admin of my own channel. I could have deleted all those comments, and I did not have to interview and do an interview. I'm going to release this as is, only editing out certain things, like when I say my last name or something, or there's a couple parts of the story that get a little too personal that I don't want the whole world knowing. There's other parts of the story where, a lot of my early experiences, I'm going to sit back down. A lot of my early experiences involved stuff that was like really dark, evil stuff. And there's some things that I get a little descriptive about that aren't really fun to hear at all. And I'll be cutting that out. And also there are, y'all, this is even with the chunk that I've already removed, y'all, I've already removed the incredibly boring part. This is a 3 hour and 40 plus minute episode. Y'all don't want to hear the banal, insipid, vapid, boring parts of this. If I can cut them out, I will, and I've always done that. But anyways, I'm going to release this episode more or less as is. I'm not going to cut out the meat and potatoes. I promise. If there's one thing that people value my channel for, it's one of the things that I hear the most. It's like some of the few feedback that I get, because my channel is tiny. But some of the biggest feedback I get is people appreciate my honesty. And I'll be damned if I, compromise that. I'm going to always do that, and this is no different. But again, this was already going to be my next episode. I'm just pushing on the gas now because I'm being called out. And by the way, I do owe this person an apology. I hate to say this please don't take this the wrong way, but you tend to come off as a troll. You definitely came off of that as that in our first exchange. Go read our first comment. Go read your first comment that you've ever sent to me. It was a total troll comment. I don't like trolls. I can't abide a troll, and I will never start a fight, but I will definitely finish one. Now, granted, you kicked my ass after I tried to fight back, but I'm... Anyways, blah, 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 blah. That being said, in our latest volley of mudslinging, I interpreted your first comment as being pushy. Where's my episode, bro? And then, like, I am your therapist. That's kind of how I thought of it. To me, it reeked of superiority. Hey, I can fix you. I got to tell you, bro, the last thing I need is agnosticism. I did that. I've been there, done that. The last thing I need. I think you're awesome. I really do. And in this conversation, and everyone will hear it, there are big chunks of this where you and I get along. I mean, big chunks where you and I get along swimmingly. If it wasn't for this divide of God and agnosticism, I think we could be good pals, man. Good friends even, but regardless, I didn't know you were reaching out to be nice. I thought you were kind of being a little bit of a troll. And I overreacted. And I don't think that my overreaction was that harsh, mind you, but then you came over with some incredibly harsh stuff in the form of brutal honesty, which, again, I don't think brutal honesty is the best tactic in most cases. I think honesty's great. I think brutal honesty isn't necessarily the best in most cases. I'm not going to go up to my fat friend and tell them that they're fat and they need to lose weight. I'm not going to go up to a person dying of lung cancer and say, you did this to yourself, you quit smoking, and I'm not trying to imply that don't take that metaphor as, I had to save Andrew metaphorically from dying of the cancer that is his belief in God. Anyways, I apologize for getting a little heavy-handed. I don't expect an apology from you. If you want to, that's great. If not, oh well. But either way, I'm going to release our content. And with all of those things, I'm going to release an episode where I address all of these things, all these little notes you see here. I'm not done. Just because I think that you're incredibly brilliant, you could be the smartest person in the world and still be wrong. And even though I'm a little slower, in terms of being off the cuff kind of thing, I'm not done with this conversation. That conversation is not done. Anyways, here we go. I'm going to release it now so the whole world can hear it. That was always my intention. Thank you very much. And I'm sorry for those of you who had to stick around for this long intro. This is going to be a long episode anyway, so it is what it is. And I'm sorry. A long intro for a long episode. Anyways, without further ado, here is my discussion with a person who brilliantly commented on a video that I overreached before I was prepared enough to release. And we'll get into that all later, and you'll hear it. Whatever. Anyways, I'm taking too long. Let's get into it now. Here we go. There are a lot of things that I'm terrible at in life. And at the top of that long list is timeliness and brevity. One need only look at both the overall length and time between each of my episodes on this channel for evidence of that fact. Over the past couple months, my content has slowed down significantly since I got my new job, but the fact is that I actually mention this all the time, am sitting on literal days and days worth of material. I just usually don't release said material because it usually doesn't follow the arc or the trajectory of my overall journey, or it's not perfect, stuff like that. But I have about 10 fully polished episodes with all the whiz-bang dramatic music and sound effects, like episodes, y'all, in various stages of completion that I'm just sitting on. I have hundreds of my little musings, my soliloquies that I record on my voice memo all the time, ranging from 2 minutes to 2 hours. I have 10 fully fledged interviews, y'all, some even video recorded, that are just sitting here collecting dust. And there are several people, one of my closest friends being one of them, whom I have promised would be the first, interview that I would release. But something happened to throw me off. Okay, a few months ago, I posted a very audacious video claiming to know the reason why, the age-old question, if God exists and is all-powerful and all-loving, why does evil exist? And I thought I had a slam dunk, well-rounded argument. Granted, I didn't go into the detail that I typically go into. I kept that episode to 25 minutes, whereas I typically, go into something like that for like 3 hours. Okay. So I didn't really shore up everything like I typically do. But regardless, a gentleman swooped into the YouTube comments thread and ripped me a freaking new one. We debated back and forth, and, I'd like to say that I got in some good shots. But he jujitsu'd the crap out of all my good shots and turned them back around on me and make me, this guy goon-handed my ass, basically. Okay, I'm not ashamed to admit it. Yeah, I think we can all learn stuff from each other, and, it's like, why not respect that? And respect is where we landed after a tad bit of venom in our overall exchange, but we, again, landed in this very respectful place, for lack of better phrasing. Anyways, I was very impressed by his overall wit and knowledge, and, I quickly realized that he was essentially my former self, okay, teetering between atheism and agnosticism, just a much beefier version, a much more well-read version and knowledgeable version. And so I was like, let's talk, and we did. And it was a long talk, okay? You can see by the length of this episode. And it actually is going to be even longer because I have every intention of releasing an episode after this episode commenting on the various aspects of it, okay? I am not the best in a debate. I am much better after the fact, kind of thinking about what I should have said and stuff like that. I think most people are like that. And although releasing a I should have said episode is rather petty, in all fairness, this is the most important topic in the history of all topics imaginable, so we got to get this stuff right? But I also have every intention on allowing Joel, okay, the person I'm talking to in this interview, to record his own, well thought out retort. So Joel, if you're listening, you will get the last word here, I promise. Anyway, I'm already making a long episode even longer with this intro, so I'm going to shut up and jump right into the discussion with someone, honestly, that I would call a friend now. A discussion with my friend Joel about God in general. Here we go. All right, so I know this is a bit strange to start. I mean, the whole premise is a bit strange, right? It's like essentially. 1 second, I just noticed something else. 1 second. Yeah, this podcast recording equipment is. By the way, we're not like live or anything, so I'm not.
Oh, no worries.
Yeah, and then in all likelihood. I mean, this is a total experiment, right? So I'm not. I may not even air this episode. I mean,
you do what you want with it.
Yeah, I think there will be some good stuff that comes out of this, though. So I think it would be worth our, first of all, our time and energy. But I also think that it would be worth publishing or whatever. With that being said. I don't know how much of my story I don't know how much of my story but I mean, obviously psychedelics is a part of my spiritual
let me tell you
awakening.
what I know.
Okay.
Let's do it that way.
Yeah, fair enough.
So I watched your Problem of Evil video, which was mostly philosophical. You didn't get too personal on that. I watched I want to say about an hour worth of your synchronicity video, which was very, very personal.
Yeah.
And I feel like laid out a pretty good idea of kind of your history. I scrolled through your videos to see kind of that psychedelic background. And I watched a little bit of a video you did on astral projection.
Cool. No, fair enough. So yeah, just to kind of paper over my story a little bit more, so you have more context. I mean, I spilled my guts quite a bit in that synchronicity episode, but just to give you more of a background, like, so I was, gosh, man, how do I even start with this? So my family, I'll give you the quick version because I tend to get a little long-winded. So there is a history of depression and addiction that runs deep in my family, and it hit me hard. Okay. And I've always considered myself a Sophoclean, like, good person with a tragic flaw, right? And so, and
what's that flaw?
Well, like addiction, right? And
okay.
And that you know, there was some. I'll put it to you this way. So
mental health in general is what you're saying.
Yeah, definitely. And, you know, and terrible things happen in really anyone's background or family or whatever, right? But
sure.
But absolutely horrendously terrible things happened to my grandfather and his siblings when they were growing up, roughly about 90 plus years ago-ish kind of thing. Something like so. And by the way, I didn't learn about this until I did ayahuasca. Like, you know, and this all could be written off as, you can explain this away rationally. I mean, it's kind of like a horoscope, right? You be as general as possible. And, you know, terrible things have happened in pretty much anyone's family if you go back far enough, right? So I concede and acquiesce to that. But basically, you know, God told me, hey, something, you know, you always wondered why you and your family have been a certain way. There was something absolutely terrible that happened in your family, blah, blah, blah. No one knew about it. I dug a little deeper and did some research, and I found an aunt of mine that I don't really talk to that much that, you know, sure enough, something terrible happened. And so my family, you know, the or whatever, we have wrestled with that our whole lives. And
okay,
so
just so I'm kind of make sure I'm on the same page here. So it sounds like what you're saying is kind of always growing up, there was sort of this thing that was always in the room, this elephant in the room, but you weren't really sure what it was until adulthood, when you kind of finally worked up the courage to get the details, and it's as terrible as you kind of thought it was going to be.
More or less, yeah. But
okay.
To bring it home a little bit more, so you know, I've always been scientifically inclined and scientifically minded, and as when I got old enough to think for myself, because I don't count the first 10 years because you kind of just mimic what your parents do, right?
Sure.
I was like, hey, what's this whole God thing? I don't believe in it. And then I discovered science, and science had all the answers, and etc. That kind of
God is that. I get you.
Yeah, exactly. That kind of led me to a path of nihilism, which opened up a window of taking my addiction and creating no limits on it, essentially.
Okay.
And that started.
Let me pause you for a minute there.
Okay.
So there's a kind of baked in assumption there that all of these things are happening at the same time, but we're putting a causal link of the one to the other, right?
Yeah, sure.
So, I mean, you can see that, like, lots of people become scientists without becoming nihilists, right?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Right.
Certainly.
Okay.
And
lots of nihilists don't necessarily become addicts.
Oh, for sure.
Right.
Oh, no,
right.
I would 1,000% agree with that. And
so so I understand from like a narrative perspective, we have this like drive to tell a story as like A happened and then B happened. Yeah. But really, all of these things are happening at the same time.
Sure.
That might become important later.
Okay. So yeah, we'll bookmark that. But yeah, so basically everything was coming to a head.
Sure.
My addiction was getting worse. It started getting to a point where the next escalation step would have been stuff that's like I think most people would consider really not cool.
Right.
That kind of was the oh shit moment for me. And
Now, did you hit a rock bottom?
I would say my rock bottom happened later on my psychedelic experiences because, again, I hadn't quite pushed it enough.
You were edging up. You were feeling the bottom. You just hadn't really landed yet.
Correct. Gotcha. I was getting a good look at what the bottom was.
Yeah, you can see it. You can see it approaching. In there. Okay.
Yeah. And so, right about then is when I met my current wife, who is, so no one's perfect, right? But like, have you ever met someone who's like 98% there? Like they have just about all of the right stuff just nailed. Like that's my wife.
Yep.
And
that's awesome.
Yeah, and she inspired me to fix myself. I'm like, I can't screw this up, right? So I did research. I'm like, what can I do to heal myself quickly? And you get the SSRI medication route, which I did for a big chunk of my life. There's the therapy route, and you can always lie to a therapist and everything, right? So I was like, did that too. Then I started seeing.
How long were you in therapy?
So I was in therapy probably starting at the age of, probably about 12 until, I would say until about 25 or so, something like that.
Okay.
And, off and on. It wasn't like I was going.
A good run.
Yeah, I wasn't going like every week. I mean, there were chunks when I was going every week, but it was here and there.
As needed.
Yeah. And so that didn't really help either because, you can lie to like the nastiest parts of my addiction I don't want everyone to know about, right? So I wouldn't,
sure.
But anyway,
so do you think you were lying to your therapist?
Oh, I certainly was, yeah. I mean, withholding, I would say for sure.
Withholding.
Yeah.
Not flat lying, just not necessarily sharing everything.
Yeah, exactly. And it was the sharing of everything, which was the absolutely most critical part. Like if we're talking about...
Probably.
If we're talking about Jungian shadow work, I wasn't doing the work, right?
Okay.
So I was like, okay, let me give this ayahuasca thing a try, and I stepped my way up through more mild psychedelics like mushrooms, and by the way, all of this legally. So I stepped my way through that into ayahuasca, and it was actually a mushroom experience before I had my ayahuasca experience that. I was like, okay, well, God's real. Like and it happened through this synchronicity that caused my mind to do just backflips on top of backflips. There were so many stacked paradoxical reason, traps or whatever within this thought that I eventually, and ultimately, if you reduce the paradox of what I was experiencing down, it's the age-old paradox of like, how did nothing spring, or how did something spring from nothing, right? And where I landed on that night was that it had to be God. And I had been previous years before this flirting with the idea of like, well, it's like, you go back and if you subscribe to like the cosmic inflationary kind of model, the quantum fluctuation that just suddenly sprang forth out of the, nothingness or whatever. I've always thought to myself, well, like, something had to do something to put that there, right? So
sure. I mean, it's a classic kind of cause and effect. I think in Thomas Aquinas's 5 Proofs, he names it twice, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, it's a common thing. I don't knock that at all. I guess what I would wonder is, you say it led you to believe God. How are you defining God at that time?
So it was an amazing kind of, it was so simple. If you remove psychedelics from the equation, because I did this one time. I used to teach elementary school kids. After I quit my software job and then got into filmmaking, to make a little more money on the side, I taught photography to elementary school kids. And one of the teachers in the room next to me, we got talking one day, and she's a God person and I am too. And I told her my God story, but I was like, there's no way I'm going to mention psychedelics, here in this school. So I just took the psychedelics part out. And when I told this, and this is what really screws with my mind, is that when you remove psychedelics as this amazing mystical catalyst, my story is laughably simple. And it's so laughably simple I got a reaction from this teacher of like, she's like, "Oh wow, that's what made you believe in God." And
I like simple.
Yeah. So here's that story, and I'll try to make it. I'll try not to go into too much detail.
No worries.
So I took, probably about 4 grams, it was probably more like 5 grams of golden teacher mushrooms, to try to have some mystical experience. Right. I knew nothing.
I got to pause you for a minute here. It's 4 grams a lot.
Okay. Oh, yes, it is. Yes, it is. So,
okay.
So 4 to 5 grams is what they consider, depending on your weight and tolerance level. It's what they consider a heroic dose. So, like, it's basically like strap in to the rocket ship. You're about to be blasted
off. You're going for a ride.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
So I have not found or even cared for, and I had seen and heard stories that people see God and stuff like that, and I thought to myself, okay, well, if I do encounter something like a God, I can write it off because I know God's not real. I'll just kind of pay attention to what it says. Maybe it says something important, but otherwise be like, okay, well, you're not real. Like, get out of here. That's kind of the mindset I had. And so
take the baby, dump the bathwater kind of approach.
Yeah, totally. And so I took these psychedelics with the intention of having some kind of cathartic experience. I took them at my boyhood home where I grew up. My mom was going to sell it, with the family's blessing, mind you. But this place is very near and dear to everyone in the family. And it was like maybe a week away from being sold. And I was like, well, I'm going to go down there and take 5 grams of mushrooms and try to relive some, beautiful experiences and see if anything happens. So I did that. Nothing really happened. I saw a few little trippy things that, were just kind of visually cool, but nothing deep. And I was a little bummed, and I decided to give up. By now it's like,
what did you think was going to happen?
Well, yeah. So I thought there was going to be, because people say,
what was your best case scenario? Like, going before you took the mushrooms, if you were like, I'm going to get this cathartic experience, it's going to be so great, and I'm going to come out of it feeling blank.
Yeah. So I hoped for, all of the stuff they talk about with a deep mystical psychedelic experience, like the whole.
You wanted a connection.
Yeah, I wanted the ego death thing. I wanted the life review. I wanted to be blasted off into, and even if I didn't believe in that stuff, like again.
Yeah. You just wanted the experience.
Yeah, I wanted to see like what would I take from this, right?
What's this about? What does it mean to me? I'm totally with you.
Yeah.
And instead you got a little bit of a trip. Mm-hmm. And you're like, so then what'd you do next?
So keep in mind, I'm going to different places on the property, like places where I had these beautiful, like fun or sometimes even sad, like memories, like hoping that some kind of mystical thing would pop out of this and give me like some kind of something, right? Some kind of cathartic release. And
you're like hoping you'd stumble across your younger self and he'd tell you the meaning of life, kind of a thing, right?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah. And so I'm going around to different places. Nothing like that's really happening. I'm seeing like just some swirly, twirly, fractal kind of things, and I'm like, okay, nothing cool here. Sure. Or rather cool, but nothing amazing, nothing life-changing. And I had given up. I was like, okay, the effects of the mushrooms have pretty much wore off. I stopped seeing any fractal, twirly, swirly things, and by now it's something like 3 a.m, and I'm like, okay, I gotta go to bed. And I'm turning off lights on the property, and it's a pretty. I mean, for this part of where I grew up, it's one of the bigger properties in our neighborhood. It's only like 3 acres, but it's enough where you have to go on a little bit of a hike to turn off all the lights on the property. So I turn off the lights in the pool house. I walk past the breezeway of the porch to my laundry room, and I turn off that light. And as I come out of the laundry room, I noticed that there was a light that was on, still, and it was at the very far end of my porch, and I had walked right past that light, not even knowing that it was on. And so when I look over, there is the light. It's almost as if someone had shown a spot. So it's, first of all, it's a cluster of flood lamps, all of which only one was not burnt out. So there was only one that was still working, and it kind of looked like a spotlight that was shining down on a lawn wicker lawn couch kind of thing that was facing in my direction. And there really should be no reason that this thing is facing my direction based on the layout of the property. It's like it should be tilted more towards the pool, but for whatever reason it's directly facing me. And it's the only light in the whole property that's on. And again, I walked past it not even knowing that it was on. And so I was like, what is this telling me here? You know, because I'm still thinking that the mushrooms are probably going to try to tell me something or whatever. And so right about then is when I realized, I'm like, oh my God, this is the spot on this property where the most beautiful moment probably in my life happened. And it was my uncle, my great uncle, one of the siblings, by the way, that these terrible things happened to about 100 years ago. He was an incredibly sweet person, probably my favorite person to ever live on the planet ever. And he would come visit us. He would spend like a month at our house. Probably like once a year he would come down and visit us. And he loved watching thunderstorms, and he loved coffee. So anytime a thunderstorm would blow through Manville, he would go in and brew a pot of coffee, sit on that specific spot in the porch. So we had a table there at that time, and just sit in the breezeway of the porch, watch the thunderstorm, and drink coffee. And anytime that would happen, I would go out and join him. And it's like the first time I had my first cup of coffee was right there with him. And he was an incredibly smart man, very philosophical kind of guy. And we would have, a little 6-year-old kid, like anywhere from like 6 years old to about 12 years old, I would do this with him. And, that
was your spot.
Yeah. Sometimes we would have these deep philosophical conversations. Sometimes we would just watch the thunderstorm. And it was my favorite memories ever in life. And the last moment, or like the last little thing that I didn't expect, because I had given up and I was like, I'm going to sleep, is a spotlight shining down on a couch that's facing directly at me of that spot. And I was like, okay, well, I approached the bench or the couch or whatever, and I was like, I'm going to sit down and kind of relive this memory, but I couldn't get it out of my head of how did the mushroom, is like I had this stupid kind of thought of like, how did the mushrooms know that this was my favorite spot? Right? I wasn't thinking about God yet. I was like, these mushrooms have these mystical, magical powers that they somehow knew that this was my favorite spot, and they aligned all of this to happen to where I, and so I got up.
Did you feel like at that moment that was what you were looking for? That was the ego death and the experience that you went into it hoping you'd get?
I don't know. Honestly, I don't think ego death certainly wasn't a part of this. I don't think, or maybe it was. I don't know, but I wasn't thinking ego death at that time. I was just. But
you felt some kind of connection, right? Because you even asked, like, how do the mushrooms know, right?
Yeah, exactly. I was like,
so you maybe got something that you wanted, but it wasn't exactly how you thought it would be.
Yes, precisely.
Sure.
And so, and there's a pattern here, and you actually kind of illuminated that pattern to me during our back and forth on our comments. Was that the same kind of pattern of, if you recall, that synchronicity of me with my friends around the campfire, and the song Just Like Heaven comes on, and I have this beautiful moment, and I leave so that I can go document it and remember it. And this was my first instance of that. I was so blown away by what just happened. I was like, I retreated to my pool house, pulled out my phone and started recording everything I remembered and my thoughts behind it. And
it was in talking it through the experience, that's when you made the connection to God, right?
Absolutely, which is exactly kind of what happened with that whole heaven thing. So I was talking.
Let me pause you really quick.
Yeah.
So I have to point out what started this whole story that we just got about the mushroom trip was my asking you to define what you meant by God.
Okay.
And I just want you to pause and think, in that story, is there anywhere in that story that gives any explanation to that question?
Well, yeah. So I think I may know where you're going here.
So, I mean, I'm just going to tell you straight up, there's not. Like, you didn't define God in that story. You told me why you came to believe in God, and that's important. I love that you told me that story. It's a great story. I don't mean to diminish that. What I'm trying to point out here is you have a very associative mind.
Sure.
Where when I ask you a question, I don't get a connection point that's like, here's a definition. It's like a connection point that's like, well, here's a story.
Yeah, certainly.
And that's not a bad thing, but that's an important thing to recognize about yourself.
Yeah.
Because if you have the kind of mind that builds things naturally into stories, you're naturally filling in gaps. That's what stories do.
Sure. No, so I'm glad, first of all, that you challenged me on this in my comments, in the comments of that video, because the funny thing, and by the way, I am skipping over an even deeper, beautiful part of the story, but again, I think that just goes without saying.
You're always going to have to.
Yeah, exactly.
But that's what I'm saying is, like, that's how the story works. As soon as we start in on, like, the story, well, now there's a tangent line, right?
Sure.
There's always going to be a tangent. And now there's going to be this other tangent, like, oh, that reminds me about one time when I was with, and then when we get to the end, we look back and we go, oh my God, there's all of these synchronicities. All these things are lining up. But it's like, well, that's the story you told. Of course these...
Well, certainly. And so that's a part, again, of why what your thread of comments kind of took, I was taken aback. I was defensive at first, and
I was afraid you would be.
Yeah, no, but
I didn't mean it to be hurtful.
No, it's fine. But the more I sat and thought about it, the more I realized that I had set my own trap. And the funny thing is that I knew that I was doing it before I even said it. Like, I mean, if you go back and listen to, I don't say this in every episode, but probably 1 out of 3 episodes that I do, I'll mention something about, like, hey, and God, quote unquote, God himself, quote unquote, told me this on one of my experiences, was that he's like, hey, life is a joke. And I butted heads with him, and I'm like, I disagree with you. And him and I got in this little argument, and then he, of course, categorically just won the argument by kind of pointing out that everything is he basically said that everything is like a poetic kind of like metaphor, paradox kind of thing. And when he kind of elucidated that to me and showed me fractally how that rolls all the way down and all the way up, and then gave specific examples of my life, how this also played into account, I was like, holy moly, he's right. All the pieces started falling into place. And then, you fast forward a month or so of deep thought on this and integration, and I realized that trying to prove that God exists is a fruitless effort, because if existence is this fractal roll up of jokes, the biggest joke of those jokes would be the existence of God, and there would always be a paradoxical trapdoor that you think you have proof, but then you'll realize that you don't have proof, and that just opens up more questions and so on. And so
let me alter your perspective here a little bit.
Okay.
When you say existing, you're saying, like, it doesn't really matter if God exists, but what does that mean, existing?
Well, hold on. I don't know if I said that. To me, it does matter quite a bit that God exists. And
okay.
And I would...
Maybe I'm just confused. Maybe let me summarize what I thought I heard you say then. You can tell me where I'm going wrong. So it sounded to me like what you're saying is that you had a kind of mental experience where you talked to something God-like, and it communicated to you that, like, the universe is a joke. Mm-hmm. And what he meant by that is that the kind of complexity of perspective layers things into fractals so that you can kind of always go backward and forward and realize that nothing really started or stopped. Everything was just changing the whole way through. Is that kind of what you mean?
I mean, it could. I don't know if I fully understand your understanding.
Maybe flesh that out a little bit more then.
Okay. Oh yeah. Okay. So what I picked up on from his statement that life is a joke is like, and by the way, I can think back to themes.
Maybe we should start by, maybe let's do it this way.
Okay.
What is a joke?
So that's another thing that this is one of the big reasons why I got so upset with him. When he said that life was a joke, I was like, I got right back in his face and I was like, nope, you cannot tell me, because I thought instantly of a ha joke, right? It's like, yeah, this is funny. And I'm like, there's nothing funny about 3-year-old babies dying of leukemia or a cartel.
I mean, there could be, right? If you made it into a funny enough joke.
I mean,
that's a topic.
Sure, but here's where we get. So you're hinting a little bit towards a degree of moral relativism here, and I think that is dangerous for
I mean, isn't a joke just anything that makes you laugh?
Sure, I would say yes, but where so I've had people come at me before and say there's no such thing as evil, right? And I get their point. I get their point. It's like, hey, a great white shark goes and eats a seal or something. It's like, there's nothing evil about that. I'm like, okay, I get it. And then people can make these correlations to evil as just survival. And I would agree with that, right? But I think that there's an extreme, and I'll give, this is disgusting, right? But I this is going to be visceral and disgusting. I warn you ahead of time.
You won't offend me, I promise.
So me,
I'm non-offendable.
Okay. To me, there is a line, right, that we cross between something that could ever be construed as funny, not being applicable, right? And I would say that would be just one example that comes to mind is and this story hints at the slippery slope of evil, right? It's always something that, in my particular case, some of the so my thing was sex addiction, right? Well, still is. I mean, I'm never going to be cured, I don't think, but so I saw this exact pattern in my own life where
no, don't move on, stick with jokes.
Okay, so basically something that you thought was disgusting before can become an acquired taste, and now it's fun and exciting, right? So but
something, hold on, let me stop that. Something that I thought was disgusting before can become an acquired taste.
Yes.
And now it's fun?
Now it's fun and exciting, right? But
what do you think about that?
But if you pull out from that...
I don't think so. I don't think that's true.
Okay, well, so I would say that...
Can you give me an example of that?
So how about I just cut to the chase with this example and tell you how this correlates in the example I was going to give. So...
Sure.
So... when I think of extremes of human behavior, in particular evil, my mind always goes to like cartels and, the freaking, genocidal maniacs, and whatnot, right? So, or serial killers, etc. So, there was a woman, I forget her name, but she was basically a drug runner for the Sinaloa cartel, or they may have been the Zetas. I don't recall, but
sure.
So she was basically just a basic drug runner, or no, she started out just doing surveillance. Like she would just, monitor neighborhoods and report stuff if she saw it. They thought she was good. They hired her, or they gave her a promotion or whatever to be a drug runner. She started encountering cartel violence around that time, and she found it, according to her own interview, right? So we got to trust her that she's being truthful, right? But according to her interview, she found the violence to be repulsive and disgusting when she first, she didn't like it, right? So then she becomes a good enough trafficker, good enough runner or whatever, where she
kept doing it.
Yeah, she kept doing it, but now because she had this ruthless quality to her apparently, or something, I don't know what.
Hold on a minute.
Mm-hmm.
What do you mean she had a rootless call to her? She didn't like it, right?
Well, there was something in her, or something, or I don't know how it happened. So I am kind of papering over a bit here, but something happened to where all of a sudden she's a sicario, which is a hitman basically, or a hit woman.
Okay.
Specific.
So she was lying before.
So she may have been.
It didn't bother her.
According to her, it started off. She started off, but I can tell you that there are certain sexual fetishes or whatever that you can start off as being utterly repulsive and kind of disgusting, and then through exposure and then escalation, that no longer is disgusting. It's kind of commonplace, but then it becomes thrilling, and the forbidden fruit becomes this super thrilling, super exciting thing, right? I think having an addictive personality is critical to this, but once you start pushing the envelope of like, this is no longer thrilling anymore, now I need to go see something or feel something that's, that escalates that thrill, you can start pushing the boundary there to where all of a sudden you look down. If you didn't notice, you are engaging in the thing that you thought was disgusting. I think the same thing happened. So basically what happened with this woman is
I don't deny that you can desensitize to things that you previously found disgusting and will now tolerate behavior that you didn't.
Yeah.
What I deny is that you now enjoy that thing.
Well, so that is...
And I think if that was true, that you now enjoy that thing, we wouldn't refer to it as sex addiction.
Sure.
Because it wouldn't be harmful. It wouldn't destroy your life.
Sure.
Right? So you don't enjoy it.
So it's very interesting that you bring that up, because that multifaceted layering of perspective there. But anyway, so to get back to this, so we'll put a bookmark there. Okay. So, but to get back to this thing of evil and how like this is an example of something that I can no way and ever any way, at least in physical.
Let me ask you a question.
What's that?
So we agree that cartels are evil, right?
Sure.
We agree that being a hitman is evil, right?
Sure.
Could I make a funny joke about the cartel and the hitman?
That's what I'm saying, is that what this woman, I'll just break it down. Like, to me, there's no existence.
I mean, that seems like a yes or no, doesn't it?
So I would say no, because to me, there's no existence imaginable where what this woman did. Again, this is the disgusting part. I'm talking like flaying people alive, wearing their faces as a mask.
Right. Does telling the joke make it worse? Yeah. Or does it make it better?
I'm just saying, man. Like having sex with the dead, mutilated bodies.
You're a citizen in the community where this happened. Okay. It's not like a distant story to us. You didn't know these people directly, but you kind of, they were neighbors, so to speak, right?
Okay.
And this has happened, and the community is super devastated that all these people have just gotten killed by the cartel. And you're walking down the street, and everyone's sad. And then someone makes a lighthearted joke about it, about one of the people that died. And everyone laughs for a minute. And for that second, everyone's aligned in purpose of like, yeah, we all agree this was disgusting, and we're all super sad, but also that was funny.
Oh, I see what you're getting at. Yeah, that's possible. I would say that's possible, but I would say the actual act, right? So what God told me is that, everything is a joke, right? But that's what I mean is like it's not necessarily a ha-ha joke, right? So he meant it more as beautiful poetry. Right, and it is what you make it. Sure.
It's like a poem. If you make it a joke, it's funny.
Yeah.
You make it a drama, everyone cries.
Sure.
Right?
I would agree, but again, I would say that whatever act is being performed, right, can still be, I almost choke on these words, beautiful, because I mean, again, Sophocles and Shakespeare, the most tragic things that they wrote was still beautiful. It just was tragically so, right? And so what God kind of elucidated to me was that everything is this. It's like there are jokes within jokes, and our lives are even this kind of joke, and everything, they're microcosms within your life. Like just about everything you're participating in right now is a beautiful, poetic kind of stanza or whatever you want to call it of there's So, and then he kind of broke down like what a joke is. It's a setup and then a punchline, which, you know, the setup is the exposition, of course, and the punchline gives meaning and purpose and ties everything up in a bow for that setup. And so he basically said everything is that, whether it's tragic or wholesome or whatever you want to call it, is a matter of, it's not necessarily, I don't know if I would say a matter of perspective, because again, I don't know how anyone could call having sex with a mutilated dead body and wearing their flayed skin on your face while you're doing so, beautiful in any regard, right? But
well, I mean, what if you had a really good craftsmanship?
I mean,
cut up the No, listen. Here's what I'm going to say to you.
Okay.
I get what you're getting at with this, but I feel like it's a distraction from what we were talking about. So I want to go back to the question of, you had the mushrooms, you had that experience, and you say, like, I'm going to go back and I'm going to talk it out. And in that talk it out experience, you realize, like, God is real. What God?
Well, so yeah, I didn't know, right? And so,
well, what would who's real then? What does that mean?
Well, so again, like once I had, you know, I was in the abyss of nihilism. One could argue that the second I decided to take mushrooms, that I probably subconsciously was already,
listen,
you're
it's not even subconscious, it's conscious. You stated, I took the mushrooms because I wanted a connection to nature and I wanted to experience this ego death and all this other stuff. And you don't even know if I necessarily thought it was true, but I thought I could have that experience.
Yeah.
That's a rejection of nihilism right there.
Oh, sure. But sure. I totally agree. So again, like, you know, and I've told people this in my podcast, is like, you could argue that, you know, first of all, I wouldn't say that I'm cured of my sexual addiction, but I have come so far that you could quote unquote say I'm cured. But regardless, you know, I tell people again, not every episode, but probably once every 3 or 4 episodes, I mention how it's like, you know, I probably was already quote unquote cured the moment I made the decision to even think about taking ayahuasca. And then all ayahuasca or mushrooms did was provide this elaborate whiz bang kind of experience to make me feel, you know, it was like a foregone conclusion or whatever that,
you needed the story.
What's up?
You've made the decision in your brain. You just needed the story to tell.
Sure.
So think about it like this way, okay? They've done experiments on people who've had to have their brain bifurcated. Okay, so you have like a really bad seizures, you're epileptic. They go in, they literally split your colossus, so your right and left hemisphere aren't talking to each other anymore. Oh,
okay? I know this. Yep. And they're making completely different decisions. Like one hand lights a cigarette, the other one puts it out, right, and stuff like that.
Let me go even more interesting than that. We'll go into the scientific stuff with it, okay?
Uh-huh.
So what it means is they'll have one ear that they can't consciously hear out of,
mm-hmm.
but that ear still functions. It still connects to the brain. All that wiring's still good. We can take them into the lab. We play a noise in the ear that they can't hear, like a bell or a trumpet. We say, just name a random item. And they'll say bell, they'll say trumpet, like significantly more than if we don't play the sound, okay?
Yeah.
That's kind of expected, right? All the wiring's still there, everything's connected. They just don't know why. So we expect them to say, I don't know why, that's just what popped into my head.
Uh-huh.
That's never what happens. Never. Instead, they always have a story why. And they always have a reason, and it always makes sense. So why did I hear the bell? Well, I went to church yesterday, and they were playing the bells. I guess that's just what's stuck in my head. Why'd you play the trumpet? Well, I was listening to Miles Davis. Like, they always have a story, and we know it's not the real reason, but the human mind needs the story.
Well,
that's the job of the consciousness.
Sure, but what if it's both? And that's what now granted, I didn't do a great job in my video. I usually do like videos that last like 2 hours, right? And so I wanted, and I was recording stuff that did approach that amount, but it became too like professorial, you know, college lecture kind of thing. And so regardless, what I'm getting at here is what I hoped to have conveyed in that video, and also in that synchronicity. Like if you listen to the end of that synchronicity video, I talk about this as well, of it being not one or the other, but both. That's
both.
What's that?
But it is both, but you haven't presented an option that enables both. So here's how you have to think about it, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever read, or I guess just one way to think about it, it's just a metaphor. So have you ever read Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy?
I saw the movie,
Okay,
which
that's
I loved.
good enough.
Yeah.
That's good. It's great. So there's two kind of super machines in that story.
Yep.
The first one is Deep Thought.
Yep.
Which is the one that they built to tell them what is the purpose of life, right?
Yeah, 42, right? Yeah.
42. And the machine really does, though, is it's 100% reliable. So even though it says 42, and that makes no sense, they know it's the right answer.
Yeah.
It has to be.
Yeah.
And so that's why they have to say, like, well, we need to find the right question, right?
Yep.
Okay, so that's one option. That's kind of the skeptical approach to all of this. Is we say, like, well, there's only one answer. It's bullshit. That's a pretty reliable answer, but also it's not useful.
Yeah.
We can't do anything with it. So then we have to start asking, like, well, what's a better question, right? The flip side of that is the other machine, and that's the improbability matrix.
Oh, yeah.
Infinite improbability matrix, okay?
Yep.
That machine is the exact opposite. So it can do anything. It can give you your monkey type in Shakespeare first try just by pushing random buttons, but it's 100% unreliable.
Aha.
So it's just as likely to turn that monkey into Shakespeare as it is to have him reproduce Shakespeare.
Yeah. Okay.
That's where you're at right now.
Sure.
So you're reading all the signs and everything comes in and you can turn it into anything, really. You can tell any story you want with it, right? And sometimes that can be really, really useful, and it can be really, really fun, and it can really feel good, but it's just entirely unreliable. So other times it's going to make you see signs and make you think things are coming, and then you're going to end in just complete rug pull heartbreak moments.
Sure. And that's, with my whole miscarriage thing, I think that kind of played out.
Yep.
So let me.
So what we
now,
have to do is we have to moderate between those, which is to say, I have to be skeptical about every single one that comes in. I can't think it's a message from God directly without very, very good reason beyond the synchronicity itself, because these things are not reliable.
Fair
but what
enough.
I can do is I can say, what does this say about me that I keep drawing this connection? And that's how we get the use back from skepticism. So that's how we moderate the position.
So let me. I think that's a good kind of, because I got to admit, I like you had no idea how we were going to approach this conversation. I feel like we just started the conversation, honestly, just now with what you just said. I want to now point this back at you and tell you that. Perfect. And ask you. So based on your comments, so I couldn't. One of the reasons why I got to admit, dude. You wiped your ass with me in the comments thread.
I didn't mean to do that.
No, man, I needed it, dude. Like, hey, I had, and again, you're part of one of my synchronicities. I had a psychedelic experience like 2 days before that, where I was basically put in my place in so many ways that like I was just, it's like, hey, you think you're Mr. Big Shot? This is you're not Mr. Big Shot. And that video I made was pretty silly, honestly, because I do. So first of all, I do, just to defend myself a little bit here. I do think that there was some original thought kind of in there that may have pushed the question in a new kind of direction. But you were 100%.
So let me defend you a little bit.
Okay.
What I liked about your video is it was very clear to me that you have a sort of curiosity that you don't normally find in people who make these kind of videos. Usually they're God, they have all the answers already. There's no, like, I'm still piecing this together. Uh-huh. And I don't trust anyone who isn't still piecing it together. So that was the first thing I liked.
Okay.
The other thing I liked is I do think you have, I think it's a combination of your natural storytelling kind of personality, like we talked about, and also your honesty, that you're willing to kind of put yourself out there in a way a lot of people just aren't. that's what attracted me to the videos.
Okay.
Like, if you want to be like, I don't want to be brutal, but like, the reason why I commented is because I do think you are a little bit behind on some of the sort of like academia side of it almost.
Fair enough.
And I think I could kickstart some of that and hopefully kind of spring you along and avoid some of the pitfalls.
Okay.
That's why I kind of started challenging in the comments, was just to see like, is that curiosity I felt real? Or was that just kind of showmanship for the story? You know what I mean?
Sure. And again, no, so I appreciate that. And I also appreciate you challenging me because, and I will apologize if I came off as defensive at times. Obviously there's
just when I knew you would be, and it was the most anticipated thing in the world. And I debated back and forth if I was going over the top by saying it. So I totally, I'm not upset about that. Okay. As much as like I decided to do it knowing that it would probably offend you, because I think sometimes that's the loving thing to do, I guess, that like,
sure.
I really felt like I had a kind of better approach to that, and then you were kind of missing something important in there. But I did know that it would probably hurt your feelings.
No. Sure. And I will say, so let me just say that sorry, I'm laughing because this is going to come off as so egotistical. I still think I'm right, but the problem is that I know you're right. You get what I'm saying? It's like
that is a problem.
Yeah. So ultimately, you're 1,000% right. In terms of like, I did not address the why question. I mean, the ultimate question that was the whole, and I do admit that there is a degree of sensationalism that you need to be like, very audacious whenever you put videos out there on YouTube so you can get views and whatnot. So the title and everything was a little audacious and a little overzealous. And it's funny, it
has to be.
Yeah, previous recordings of it, I actually said, "Hey guys, I'm not going to be able to answer the question, but I think I'll get I'll get about as close as we can get without, So I think that I probably should have packaged it a little bit better. But you were ultimately 1,000% right. Like, all I did was kind of move the goalposts, and it played a little shell game with. I mean, ultimately, regardless if I am correct, which is, my thought again was that God, even being all powerful and all loving, intentionally limited himself to create a stone that he could not lift in the form of free will, so that this game of imperfectness that would only serve to refine and increase in strength and love would play out with a degree of autonomy. But the riddle, of course, is that God has his free will in his hands, and this is right. As well. And so there will be the concept of free will is such a baffling one, because I firmly believe, and quote unquote have seen, that free will and something like predestination are the same thing. It
can't be.
It's just that down here they get splintered off into something paradoxical and separate.
Now you have to define them, because they're definitionally opposite.
Exactly, but so is quantum mechanics and relativity. But if you
no, it's not.
So yes, they are. So just about every, unless you ignore time, right? But just about every theory of everything that anything we've tried doesn't work.
Every quantum mechanic and physicist will tell you is that we don't have a unified theory.
Sure.
That's the difference. The one doesn't claim to describe the other.
Well, what if
they're not in conflict?
So, what if free will and predestination are similar? So basically, they
definitionally conflict with each other.
Well, again, I believe.
Right, so, like, if I define relativity as the rules that govern Newtonian and larger mass, and I define quantum mechanics as the rules that govern only the very, very small things, that's not in conflict. But if I define free will as having the ability to kind of choose your own fate, and I define predestiny as having the ability not to choose your own fate. Like that, those things they have to be in conflict.
So again, maybe, right? So what I'm getting with this here is that from what, and we can cite my lack of, I fancy myself a philosopher kind of type, but I don't. I have philosophy books and whatnot, but I didn't get a degree in philosophy or whatever.
If you can talk, you can do philosophy.
Sure.
It shouldn't be made bigger than it is.
But to me, I feel like that. It feels like, based on what I have experienced and this thought would have never occurred to me had it not been. Well, I can't say that for certain, but there was a sudden rush of something that I at least feel like it would have never have occurred to me unless I did psychedelics and talked to what I call God, when he kind of unfurled this idea of the existence being flawed by everything, this whole joke thing that I talk about, is that it's all paradox, right? This whole yin and yang thing, right? It's like that theoretically in my mind shouldn't be the ideal. Like, why would you need an imbalance? Even though it is balanced, it's like I need to, the only way for me to understand light is to know dark. And that just doesn't seem right to me. Right. So there's these paradoxes that,
why not?
It's just, I don't know. Like when I think of if
we define dark as the absence of light, that makes perfect sense that you'd have to know one to know the other.
But why should we have an absence of something in a otherwise, like how is this a perfect system is what I'm saying. And
that's the system we have.
Sure.
It isn't perfect. Who said it needed to be perfect?
No one said that. So I didn't say, in fact,
that's what, to me, perfect is a slippery term.
Sure.
Because it kind of gets to, like, we can talk about almost like a Plato's forms model, right? Of like, what is a perfect object, right? Like, what is the perfect form of a dog versus is every other dog on earth just a representation of that form, but that they can never be that perfect form? Well, there's no evidence of any of these perfect forms. They're just abstract ideas. So the real perfection is what is, seeing things for what they are.
Okay. So
that's my theory.
Okay, so I'm gonna try to play with this a little bit more here. So going back to this whole paradox thing, right? So how do I approach this? Okay,
so your best argument with the contrast stuff is when you get into aesthetics, when you talk about love, you talk about beauty, because that is true. It is 100% true there that we can't handle symmetry in our abstract creations.
Sure. Well, also, I would take that a step further, and I would say that 100% perfect symmetry is not even possible in the universe, based on the research I've done. So,
so this is where we get into like a thin line here. So, my mind's in the universe, right? Mm-hmm. Can I picture a perfect circle? How are you going to test that? I don't know. So that's why I say these things can only exist perfectly in the abstract. We don't find one in nature outside of maybe a mind.
Sure. But that's kind of what I was getting at, is like, it's the mechanics. And I know that we disagree on this, or maybe you agree, but in a different way. I don't know. But it's that mechanics of the perfect thought form in your head being completely obliterated upon physical manifestation. Like the only way that I can get that perfect thought form in my head out into the universe is to impose limitations on it, and it therefore loses its perfectness. And that is what I think existence is. And I think that's why there is dark coupled with light.
That's what human existence is. Yeah, for sure. So we form inferences, we guess about the world before it happens, and then it happens, and we have to inductively rebalance our inferences, right? That's the inductive circle. That's David Hume.
Sure.
That's really what we're talking about, is the difference between how we think before something happens and how we think after that thing happens.
Sure,
right?
Sure. But again,
before we go out and explore, we can have this idea of the perfect circle in our mind. But then once we inductively see that, like, oh no, that doesn't exist, then we have to go back and say, well, was that circle in our mind ever really perfect? How can we test that?
Sure.
We can't. So maybe it wasn't ever perfect even in the abstract. That's what I'm saying.
Well, what if that is also a byproduct of our imperfect existence that we live in? So in other words, what I'm getting at here is like,
yeah, we're human. It is.
Yeah. So either way, what I'm getting at here is that to me, it's theoretically possible. And sure, I should have prefaced
What is
that
theoretically possible?
Well, so like I should have prefaced that whole video by saying like all of this is theoretically possible, right?
No, you shouldn't, because that doesn't mean anything.
Sure.
Everything's theoretical. Like in that, if you're using theoretical in that sense, everything's theoretically possible, right?
Fair enough. But I guess what I'm saying is that it's logically and theoretically possible, for lack of better phraseology, that all of this could still spring forth from a perfect and all-loving God that intentionally imposes limitations on himself. Like what if there's other forms of quote unquote language that produces perfection, right? That we could never understand and know about.
Here's the problem with that. Who made this language?
So that's the point. Like to me, it all comes from the source, right? It's like, so the source would be God, right? And you're just pushing the problem further back. Mm-hmm. No, I know. I know. It's like the whole question of like, why does evil exist? It's still, no matter how far back I push it, there's still a part of it that's like, okay, sure.
Right, because I'm going to suggest to you, I think you misuse the term paradox.
Fair enough.
I'm going to ask you to define that term.
Okay. So again, I would say,
I don't want a story. I want a definition of what does the word paradox mean when you use it.
So to me, it's something that it conflicts with something else in a. So I'm trying to define my own. I'm trying to make my own definition of it. I know what it is.
No, that's what I want. Yeah.
Yeah. So I know what it is. It's just hard to explain. So a paradox is something that conflicts with itself in a way. It's like, this statement is false, that whole thing. And so, I mean, that's an example of a paradox.
So that's
right?
an example. Yeah. So that's a liar's paradox.
Yeah.
So what a paradox really is it's a logical, what's the word? Premise, conclusion, right? It's a logical argument that intuitively can't be true. That you just can't make yourself believe it. You know that something's broken about it. But if you just look at the premises, the conclusion does seem to logically follow naturally from them. And the resolution to paradoxes is one of the conclusions is always a lie. And so, one of the premises. That's how you resolve paradoxes.
Are paradoxes ultimately resolvable, though? I mean, I think some of them are. Almost all of them. Okay.
So you look at the oldest, most classical paradox in the world is Achilles' paradox from Zeno. Do you know that one?
I know. There's enough. So he runs.
Achilles has to run a race.
Yeah, and he has to run half of it.
Point A to point B, but before he can get there, he's got to go through the middle point, which is C.
Yep. And then you got to keep having that.
You got to go through the middle point of D, which is between A and C, right?
Yep.
So how is he ever going to reach the end if he has to go through infinity to get there?
Yeah. No, I get it. So
intuitively, we can't accept that, right? Like he has to reach the end of the race. We know that because we see people reach the end of the race. But logically, we can't always divide that point, and logically, he will have to go through infinity to get there. So how do we resolve that? So I guess I bent it. So it's either missing a premise or one of the premises is untrue. So in this case, it's missing a premise, which is that there's an infinity in one. We can always subdivide things. It doesn't change that the whole number's still there. 0.9999 repeating equals 1.
Sure, and plus you're approaching a limit, right? So of course you're going to traverse, you're going to eclipse that, right? So if you're approaching a limit. So yeah.
Right. That's how every paradox works, is when it first comes out, people go, oh my God, yes, that seems true, but no, I can't accept that conclusion. it must be a paradox. And usually there's a period where they go like, it can't be resolved. Logic's broken. The world's flawed. We just have to accept that we're not perfect.
So,
and then 20, 50, 100 years from now, somebody will come along, Spinoza will come along and turn the whole thing on its head.
Sure. But I would say, okay, that there are probably unresolvable. I mean, well, you've mentioned it yourself, like you're like almost all paradoxes can be resolved, right? I would say that free will and predestination are an example of a paradoxical thing that we will probably never be able to resolve.
Let me solve it for you right now.
Okay.
You ready?
Hit me with it.
You remember how we talked about before the fact and after the fact with David Hume, right?
Mm-hmm.
Before something happens, you have no free will. It's all determinate. It's cause and effect, right? The same reason that you had to believe something started the universe is the same reason why we can't control it. If we start inserting free will before that, we're going to break down in everything the promise of evil to moral luck. It just gets messy, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Post hoc, that's when consciousness, like so after the fact, that's when consciousness kicks in. And consciousness, its job is to tell you the story that was your choice.
So
the
you're
reason
saying
why it does that is because that's how you get to feed back into the universe.
So you're ultimately saying with that there is no free will.
I don't know. I said it happens after the fact. So here's what happens after the fact. You made a bad decision, okay? You couldn't control that. It's your upbringing, it's your genes, it's your addictive personality. You make that bad decision. Now you get to evaluate that. And you get to say, that was a bad decision. And you get to tell that story over and over to yourself. That was a bad decision. That was a bad decision. Every time you say that to yourself, whatever mode that looks like, you're reprogramming yourself. So then when the next time comes, the next choice comes along, you don't have any say in it still. All that programming is done. So without free will, you make an action. But now you get to evaluate it after the fact. That's how the human mind's built.
So free will.
We make inferences. We make inferences beforehand. It's passion. It's imagination. It's hypothesis. Then we run the experiment. We analyze it, and we adjust our hypothesis. And then we rinse, repeat.
So free will becomes a reflective kind of analysis versus a proactive kind of like in the moment, like I'm going to. So you're basically saying is like you influence your
after the fact.
Yeah, you influence your algorithm through the analysis, but then your algorithm runs, and then things happen, and then you keep circling back.
Keep circling, and that circle turns into a tornado. And next thing you know, you're a complex human being, right? When it starts out, you're just a little baby. You can't do anything. You're not even really like a person, as we would think about it. And you have no personality, really. Then those things start circling, those like innate inferences of what it means to be human start kicking on. Circle keeps going. Your environment starts playing into it. Next thing you know, it's so complex. It's a tornado. It's a personality. It's a person.
Okay, so that certainly could be one way that free will plays itself out.
Doesn't that resolve the paradox?
I don't know if it ultimately does. I would need to do more thinking on it for sure. But that does kind of because here's.
But I'll tell you what will never resolve the paradox.
What's that? If
we say it can't be resolved, and only God will do that at Judgment Day.
No.
You'll never get it resolved.
Oh, no. I'm not suggesting that. Like here's.
I'm not saying you're doing that.
Okay.
Always.
Okay, fair enough.
But there definitely are times in the way you argue where you go, yeah, that's a paradox, and I see all these paradoxes, and I go, yeah, God must be real. It's like, well, you could attack these paradoxes.
Yeah. No, sure, you definitely can. But so like, let me kind of like tell you what I've gleaned from my interactions with quote unquote God on these experiences is that
before you do though, you have to define who you're talking to.
Well, what do you mean?
You keep saying these conversations I had with God, but is that Krishna? Is that Jesus? Is that Allah? Who are we talking about?
So I will say that I was skeptical of what God I was talking to at first. The more I kept talking to him, and telling my buddies about it, who are Christian. They were like, "Oh, this is sounding more and more like the God of Abraham." Next thing you know, I have this incredible synchronistic moment where the face of Jesus appears to me in my shower, and I have photographic and video evidence of it.
Hold on a second.
What's up?
How do you know it was Jesus?
Well, it's.
Did he have a crown of thorns?
So he looked like an ancient Hebrew Jew, and there was 3 crucifixes around him.
There were 3 crucifixes?
Yeah.
You sure those weren't X's?
No, they were pretty clear crucifixes to me.
You
and then
sure they weren't the Hindu cross?
Could have been, but there were repeated signs of the cross. And man, there was.
Okay.
There's so
All
many.
Right, it was Jesus. Moving on. Go ahead.
But just to kind of like I'll give you one last little quick story about this Jesus connection. Is I was in New Orleans talking to my friend one day. He's a Christian, big time guy, total like Bible thumper. He's someone I would call a turbo Christian, right? That it's like whatever's in the Bible is all that is, kind of.
Sure, literal.
But, yeah. So I was talking to him about the concept of Jesus, and I was just now starting to get introduced to the concept. And it's funny, every time I was with him and we were talking about Jesus, there would be a sign of the cross that would appear randomly. Sometimes incredibly overt. Sometimes you'd have to really look for it and be like, hey, do you see that right there? But regardless, this one time I was talking to him and I'm like, hey, look, I think I'm understanding this concept of Jesus. It's like there's the infinite, which is incomprehensible. And then there is human beings that are finite. And we need some bridge or whatever to bridge the gap between the finite and the infinite. And I was like, that theoretically could be Jesus. And right as I'm saying that, my friend goes back to lean against the wall and puts his arm up on this light brace and accidentally puts his hand around a rosary that was hanging there. And so there have been so many instances of these in my opinion, earth-shattering. I mean, you'll never get proof. I mean, but to me, these.
Do you think it's odd that Hindu people have synchronicities that point to Hindu gods? And do you think it's odd that Muslim people have synchronicities that point to Allah? And do you think it's odd that Christians have synchronicities that point to Jesus?
I don't.
I mean, wouldn't we expect that? So are they all the same person?
So that's what I've been wrestling with, is that I have a friend who's kind of a hybrid Hindu kind of mystic something or other. I don't know exactly where to place him spiritually, but he definitely is like Hindu to a degree, or to a large degree. And his proxy for Jesus or whatever is what is it? Shiva, right? And so. But he even acknowledges Shiva as a symbol, right? So he's like, Jesus is a symbol, Shiva is a symbol, Buddha is a symbol, like all these things are symbols for something else, right? And going back to like, so
these, that's the approach I take also.
Okay, I've been wondering like what you're about, and I think I was thinking that's probably what it is that. There's a source to a source to the source to the source to the source, right? And
so I'll kind of lay it out for you. Okay. Just kind of here's my God insight. So, if I'm just at like a dinner party and someone asks me like what religion I am or something, I'm probably just going to tell them I'm an atheist, because then it's just going to kind of shut it down.
Yeah, it's just easier to kind of just be like, all right,
it just covers more ground, and then we're done.
Yeah.
In a conversation like this, I would say that I am a firm agnostic.
Okay.
And that I would say when it comes to the questions that really, really like push the limits of philosophy and human understanding, like is God real, that kind of thing, I don't know. And I don't really think anyone can know.
Sure.
And I'm on the fence about if it's just entirely unknowable. The only like hold up I have is like, who knows what the future holds? So maybe some new thing would change my mind on that. But at present, I don't think anyone can know. So then you have to say like, well, why do we have so much of people claiming to know? And, most atheists just get really angry and like, because people are, corrupt and they're horrible and they want to, blah, blah, blah. I don't think that's why. Like, I think there has to be some value in the stuff. Some kind of, whether it's metaphorical, whether it's symbolic, like whatever you want to call it, there has to be some like day-to-day ethical value and some kind of like philosophical backdrop, if you will, right? So that's the approach I take to all of it. And so that's why I really like to push people about like, well, what God are we talking about? Like, give me the details, because when I hear you talk, you sound way more Hindu than Christian to me.
Sure. No, I would say that, and by the way, I'm not joking around, 2 days ago discovered Eastern Orthodox Christianity, which really rings true. Like, I started reading up on that, and it is basically a carbon copy understanding of what Christ is based on my quote unquote direct conversations with the guy. And all of that is very Hindu kind of leaning, a Gnostic leaning.
Well, I mean, do you know what happened when the Catholic missionaries first went into India?
No.
They loved them. They accepted the whole thing right away.
Oh,
they were
yeah.
like, baptized us right away. And then they went to church the first week, and they started laying out like the 10 Commandments and like, you shall have no other God before us. And they were like, whoa, slow down. What are you saying? Like, we just thought Jesus was another reincarnation of Krishna. You're telling us we can't do Krishna anymore? And then they all left.
Oh, interesting. Well, it's funny because I have a book called it's not on my bookshelf right now. It's on my what is it? The Yoga Sutras of something. I forget what, but it's a very Hindu based kind of yogi kind of thing. And they mentioned Jesus a lot, and I was surprised.
Yeah, he's a reincarnated prophet, basically. Same thing with Muslims. He's a prophet.
Yeah.
He's just not divine.
Yeah, that's the same way. Dude, I have like that's why like I feel like and by the way, I don't think that this is. I think this is so not dangerous. I not only think that this is not dangerous. I think that this is a beautiful answer for all of humanity, and it goes like this, right? And again, I preface this by saying that one of your comments really hit home with me, and I really, believe it or not, appreciate your brutal honesty when you kind of pointed out to me. You were like, so you're basically saying that the path through God is through Andrew's logic and brain, and I was like, damn, he's right. I really am like kind of doing that either consciously or unconsciously, right? And so that's the infinite improbability matrix backfiring. Yeah, sure. And so
you've lost that reliability to connect back to kind of like the universe, really, and say like, well, no, I'm pointing to this concrete thing. Yeah, you're not anymore.
Yeah. So getting back. So I'll preface what I'm about to say by saying that you're right. Right. So what I'm going to say may come off as like me trying to be Mr. Smarty Pants or whatever, but
you're good.
But I do think that there's something here, right? So God, on one of my recent experiences, has kind of again unfurled to me this concept of how he prefaced this was amazing. He basically said that something can be, well, how did he say it? Something can be true, but also not real. And I was like, what? And then the more and more I thought about that, I was blown away by it's like, yeah, it's like when you think about fictional stories. I mean, one of my favorite movies ever, well, going back to childhood, it's no longer my favorite, but Terminator 2, right? It's obviously just a ridiculous movie. I mean, it's so like,
oh, take that back.
Oh, I love it so much. Don't get me started, man. I love that movie. But it like no one's going to go into Terminator 2 to find deep, profound, axiomatic, truths, right? And
I disagree.
And I disagree too.
Entirely.
I disagree entirely too. God showed to me. He said, he was like, despite Terminator 2's ridiculousness with the flipping shotguns and the liquid metals and all this stuff, he was like, there is a truth at the core of Terminator 2 that completely obliterates any fiction wrapper that's wrapped around it. And I was like, what? And God was like, here's the thing about Terminator 2. John Connor reprograms the Terminator to go back and save himself, right? Here's a killing machine that wants to kill all humans that John Connor reprograms. So it still has a lot of that killing nature in him. He goes back and reprogram or to save John Connor. And in the process of doing so, there's a part of his programming that is has to do with infiltration. It's like learn how humans behave so you can become a better killing machine, so you can infiltrate and be like them and kill, right? So the part of his programming does that. And then in the course of doing that, there is a transcendent something or other that happens to where he stumbles upon he stumbles upon humanity and love, basically, and understands why it needs to be protected. And the Terminator terminates himself to protect that. And he does so for all of humankind. And God basically said, despite all of the illusion wrapped around that, I mean, it's an illusion within an illusion within an illusion, that movie is, right?
So let's go even deeper layer before you tell me the God connection. You ready?
Uh-huh.
The story's about free will.
Okay.
Versus determination, predetermined. Right?
Oh yeah, because you're altering timelines for sure. Yeah.
So I mean, in the very first movie, they go back in time to stop John Connor, right?
Uh-huh.
And their going back in time is what produces John Connor.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep, I'm with you.
And so it really is a full statement of everything I was just describing about free will, that like before the act, you don't really have a choice. All you can do is retroactively say, how are we going to sort of recalibrate after the fact, right?
Sure.
The machine can't change that, like its attempt to change fate only created it. So what does the machine do? It upgrades.
Yeah.
That's the lesson.
No fate but what we make. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Is there no fate but what we make?
So I don't know.
Ever born out in the Terminator? Like that's what all of these stories are. Literature, movies, they're all battlegrounds for moral dilemmas.
Sure.
So that's why they're just metaphor machines.
For sure. But I would say, and to tie this all back, I would say that that's what our lives in general are. Like what God showed me on that experience is that, and I already subscribe to this, and I think that there's scientific precedence for this with a 2022 Nobel Prize for Physics that, points out that there's no hidden variables in quantum entanglement, and those dudes said that based on that the universe is quote unquote not locally real. I think that hints towards what the mystics have been calling out for millennia, which is that this is all an illusion, right? And if this is all an illusion, then we're all theoretically fictitious characters in a movie like Terminator 2. And when you got people like Jews and Muslims in Gaza right now ripping each other to pieces and killing everyone because a slice of a slice of a slice of their illusion is tied to these fictitious stories, right? To me, there is a central truth underneath all of this that if people understood, they would drop their guns and bombs and all this stuff and realize that
that's the assumption you're making now. What if it's the exact opposite? What if when we actually get down and we look at the underlying code, like have you ever read the comic Preacher?
No.
The comic Preacher, he's on this quest to find God. He wants to call God, basically. So he goes through all of these things. He finally gets a phone from an angel, and he has like the power to call up to heaven, and he's going to finally get answers from God. Okay. Mm-hmm. And so he calls his whole congregation in, and they all get in there, and they're all so excited, and he calls God, and a person appears in a white beard, and they're all like so happy and like, oh my God, we're going to end, everything bad is going to be so great. And what they realize really quickly in the course of the conversation is that's not God. God is dead. God is gone. Like nobody knows what happened to God. He's just not here anymore. And he hasn't been for a long time. And that nobody's really running the ship. And so then the message ends and chaos erupts.
Yeah. No, so that would be the alternate.
Like what do you really think people would do if they found out tomorrow that actually this is all just a fifth dimensional video game? That there's a little kid and he's playing one character right now. We don't even know who. That's the main character. We're all NPCs. What do you think people would really do?
Well,
because I'll tell you, my goal with how I live my life, I don't want to change it all if I find that out. I want tomorrow to be exactly the same as today was.
So I would agree and disagree with that. I would say, and this is I don't know if this is going to be necessarily correlated to what we were saying, but I was hoping to go in this direction with this conversation. So I would agree, right? It's like, and this is one of the reasons why I think like if there is a truth to this, right, and it can be in some way provable, it would be the most closely and should be the most closely guarded secret in all of existence. It's like, why would we let this cat out of the bag?
Why?
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't follow that. Why wouldn't you tell everyone?
Well, it's because of that collapsing element. I think that there are so many fundamental things that people have, entrenched themselves behind that if it came out to that,
you could have told them from the start. Right?
Sure.
Like if you're building the cosmic rulebook, it could have just been baked in. Everyone just knows.
Well, what if we do, and we just don't remember? And that's one of the other central things that have had a...
Well, I mean, that's kind of a distinction without difference, right? Like not having it versus having it but can't access it. Like that's just, I mean...
Well, I think you can, though. So that's another... and I know the paradoxical pitfall for this as well. Like just about every one of these amazing, quote unquote, amazing things that I've learned from God or whatever on these experiences.
Sure.
He's always kind of like they've either seemed very familiar to me, like it's like, oh man, I've always kind of known this, or he'll go right, or he'll go right out and say, Andrew, you've known this from the start. I'm just helping you remember it. And this also kind of factors into another time when.
Do you believe that though? Do you think like all of the knowledge of the universe is in your head? And you just don't have access to all of it yet? Or are you like learning and actually building up that knowledge base?
I hate to say it, but I feel like it's probably both. Again, and I might be using the word paradoxical wrong again, but to me, this is one of those paradoxes that it's...
So explain that. How can it be both?
Well, okay, it's like, how can God be both God and science? It's like, I think that I think he launders himself and his signature through science and materialism. I think that that's part of this paradox. Like you'll never get
so this is something we got to touch on. Do you think God is the universe, or do you think God exists outside the universe? Do you think we can't know? I
think we partially can't. Well, I think we can't know ultimately. But if I were to make an educated guess based on my experiences and whatnot, I would say that it's both. I think that God is a lot more than this universe, but I think that this universe is part of God.
Right. Sure. So if he exists outside the universe, then he can also encapsulate the universe, right?
Sure.
Like think about what's the circle charts, right?
Yeah.
So what I'm getting at here is there's times when you talk about God, and I could just switch out the word God for nature, and the sentence would make complete sense to me, and I think it would actually be insightful. But when you load in the term God, where other times you're referring to something that's kind of like outside the universe and originated it and created it, it starts feeling very slippery. Like, I'm not sure which concept are we talking about. Are we talking about nature now? Because I can agree with that. But if we're starting to expand beyond, then I have to say, I don't know.
Yeah, and I think that ultimately we all have to say that, because, again, I think that my whole endeavor and the whole reason why I started my podcast is kind of silly, because no one can ever prove any of this, right? And so it's almost useless that we're having this conversation at this point. But
you can prove things wrong.
Sure, but
you can still prove things wrong, and you can prove things contradictory.
Sure.
And that's a foundational part of logic that like, honestly, that's why you're not going to get anywhere in these I'm starting to very much get the impression that, like, we could talk about this stuff forever, and I don't think I'm going to change your mind in the slightest.
Sure.
Because you're completely willing to live with contradiction in a way that just destroys logic. It's just entirely illogical.
Sure.
And so I'm never going to be able to use logic to sway you, and I can't get inside your mind to play with your emotions without being called really cruel on the internet and stuff.
Well, no,
so
and
it's just not going to win.
Well, to be fair, you I would say that you could have and I'm not saying that you need to do this. I think that people need to have a little bit thicker armor or whatever. But I think there was a couple examples.
Do you think I need thicker armor?
No, like I think I do, right?
Oh, you think you do?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I do think that there were a couple instances where you were maybe a little provocative. I'll just say that. But and you know, that's fine.
Is that bad?
I mean, it is what it is. I'm appreciative of it now, but you know,
well, then it has to be good, right?
Well, I don't know, but it's something like, you know, it's like just from the start, like it's like, hey, AI, and listen to me with my little sarcastic voice here. I apologize.
No, you're good. Please do. I like it.
But it's like, hey, AI models, large language models, interpret everything as language. Wow, it was like that was a big kind of FU in my opinion. And then a little bit further down.
In my defense,
yeah,
I'm right though, aren't I?
Well, I would still say that I'm going to agree to disagree with you on this, but because of that, as silly as it is, that bologna and cheese sandwich example, it's like my point there.
I remember that one. Tell me the bologna and cheese example again.
So my whole point there, and I didn't dive too much into it. Like you were right in calling it out. You eventually said you didn't flesh out that.
Hold on. Let me predict what you're going to say first. Okay. You're going to say I was right. But it's a paradox.
No,
because that way you still get to be right too.
No. So,
okay, let's hear it.
That might end up what I'm saying. I don't know. I don't know yet. But so you were right in calling out that I didn't frame that argument well enough, right? And because I wanted to make it a shorter video, I would.
It's a bad argument.
Well, fair enough. But in your opinion, it is. In my opinion, again, with this bologna and cheese sandwich example, right? It's like my point was that AI has been around in one shape, form, or fashion for, you know, decades, like 30 plus years or whatever, and it's always kind of sucked. And
now you have to define AI. So I don't think it has been around for 30 years. So what's your definition?
The way that we know it, right, has you know, today with this really successful iteration of it with large language model AI, that is a few years old.
Large language learning models, that's a few years old, not 30.
No, I know, but I'm saying like AI in general.
That's what we were talking about, right?
No. So hold on, just hold on 1 second.
Okay.
So the whole amorphous, you know, cloud of what we call AI in general, like machine learning before
computers?
That. Well, so okay, let me pull up let me see if I can find like the previous versions of it. So like machine learning would be one.
So we agree that like machine learning. Okay, so but you're saying, let's roll with it. Let's say it's been going 30 years. I don't want to get bogged down.
Okay. So okay. So what I'm saying is there have been certain, and this isn't according to me. Like this is I went and researched this, and the experts were telling me this. Like I heard an expert say this. Now, granted, I should have went a few layers deeper, right? But this quote unquote expert is like, hey, look, for decades. AI has operated in these silos, and like one area was focused on machine learning, another one was focused on like image processing, another one was focused on blah blah blah, and they all had their different silos, different departments, different buildings you would walk into at a university, etc. Large language model AI comes along and does wonders with very simple code in the area of language, right? And the people using that are like, let me just point this at something else. Let's take this large language model AI tool and tweak it just a little bit to now point over in this image recognition thing. And then to their surprise, it did wonders there. And then like, oh, let's point it over to this silo that previously was separated, and let's see if and it did wonders.
Isn't that how technology has always worked?
Sure, but my point here, and this is critical to my point, and I know you're going to have an answer that's going to completely goon hand me, but I'm going to say it anyways. So my point here is going back to this bologna and cheese sandwich model. So if I had a bologna and cheese sandwich algorithm, that I pointed towards bologna and cheese sandwiches, and it gave me impressive results about bologna and cheese sandwiches, that even if those results are impressive, it shouldn't.
What does that mean? Impressive results?
Well, it's a silly analogy, but
I'm not. I don't even follow it. Like, so, what is the bologna and cheese algorithm?
Okay, well, so we'll just go back to large language model then. So I have a language based algorithm that I point at language, and
Sure.
it is able to complete sentences and create whole
Well, it learns
paragraphs.
to.
Yeah, it learns to, and it creates paragraphs, and you could tell it.
Sure.
You could say, "Hey, create for me a William Shakespeare sonnet that doesn't exist," and then it'll create one, and it would be so amazing that scholars.
We gotta. What do you mean when you say we'll create one?
So in other words, like
It'll pull from other language and use pre-designed models to arrange other people's words.
well,
right?
that's
what it's doing.
Well, it
isn't
uses word vectoring. So it takes words. What it would do essentially is go look up William Shakespeare, probably all of its works, and if you said the word sonnets, it would go look at all of his sonnets, and it would take
Right.
all the words and all those sonnets, and it would find
It
a
looks
pattern.
at your prompt,
Yeah.
and it says, what's the commonality between the words they just used and words I've seen in my learning?
Sure.
And it just pulls those examples, and it rearranges them like a puzzle. Right?
Well-
but it's not creating anything new.
Well,
It's
is
rearranging other people's stuff into a new kind of collaboration, if you will.
a collaboration, sure, but it would essentially take all that and make an educated guess. I use the word
Well, let me
educated.
ask you a question. If we train a language AI on Chinese, will it ever give me predictions in English?
So it's done that. So
Without prompting, it'll just write English out back to me.
without prompting, it has actually gone and learned languages by itself and came back. I forget exactly the story there, but there.
Oh, don't. That's not what I asked though. If I ever ask it a question in Chinese, will it ever give me an answer in English?
I don't know. Probably not because the
Why would it?
parameters.
That would be a huge flaw, right?
Well,
if
I
you
would
had an AI that you were marketing in China, and every time they asked a question, it gave an answer in English, people wouldn't use it. They'd hate it, right?
No. I'm saying it will give you the answer in the language that you give it in because there's the parameters set at the beginning are set towards whatever.
Why is that?
So I don't know. I feel like we're getting a little wrapped around the
this is
axle.
important. Why is it that it would answer the question in the same language that you ask it in? It doesn't have to. Why does it choose to do that?
Well, first of all, again,
Because it's built to answer you. Like, that's the obvious answer.
Sure.
Like, it wants you to understand. So we shouldn't be shocked if the thing we build to be understandable, like, speaks language. Like, that was the whole point I meant. Like,
no, I completely agree.
it's a little bit like building a square box out of wood,
Uh-huh.
like a birdhouse, and then being like, oh my God, we built this thing that has right angles. There's no right angles in nature. We're gods.
No, I get what you're saying, but again, hear me out. And let's don't get wrapped around the axle about the bologna and cheese thing, but I'm going to go back to bologna and cheese for a second.
Okay.
So I have a bologna and cheese algorithm that I point to bologna and cheese, and it gives me bologna and cheese results, right? No surprise there. I shouldn't be like, oh, wow, we're God, right? What becomes interesting to me and where it becomes something more than the sum of its parts or whatever is if I take that same bologna and cheese algorithm and I point it at the rest of reality that isn't a bologna and cheese sandwich, and I get
and it tells you about reality. Why would that surprise you?
But I get very impressive bologna and cheese sandwich results when I know
For the universe. Sure.
based on
where's this bologna and cheese sandwich though?
Well, that's what I'm saying. It's like.
Isn't it in the universe?
Well, that's the big question. I would say, and this is all a matter of perspective,
That's
mind
not
you.
a question.
No, hold on.
It's definitely in the universe.
Well,
right?
let me finish. So my point here is that if I take it wouldn't make sense to me that I would point a bologna and cheese algorithm out in the universe and get impressive bologna and cheese results. To me, that would be very surprising, right? So
that's all of science.
Well, to me,
all of science is we study things here locally, and then when we generalize it, it best still work. Because if it doesn't, we screwed up. That's all of science.
Well, there are no correct models, only useful ones, right?
Exactly.
But again,
so what you're saying is like, isn't it crazy that we built this thing with a specific purpose, and it does that specific purpose well, and then when I turn it to other purposes, it does those pretty good too? It's like, no, you just built an awesome tool.
Well, no.
Right? Like the hammer can hit the nail, but it also can turn around and chop wood if you hit it hard. Like all of these things, like every tool can be used for better and worse purposes, and we're always realigning what those are. But that doesn't mean like the tool is magic or something, or that the tool has like some. It's us.
Well,
we made it. We use it,
so,
and that's why I get so offended. I shouldn't say offended. That's the wrong word. That's why I get so passionate in these conversations is when I hear people talk like this, it frustrates me because I feel like you're harming society by robbing us of our initiative.
Okay, but give me a second. Well, so first of all,
we did this.
Well, okay, fair enough. But let's take your hammer, right? And it's really good at hitting nails, right? But it would be very terrible at cutting wood, very terrible. And you may not have picked the perfect analogy there, but what I'm trying to get at here.
But so no, it's not always terrible at cutting wood. Okay, like if you worked in a carpentry shop, you know that you regularly have to use a hammer to assist in cutting wood, whether that's in pushing a piece of wood through a table saw as like a pusher, or you might need to use a hammer to adjust something within a table saw, right? Like all of these, the world is not isolated into these realms, right? Like you could clamp down a piece of wood, hammer off, and get a perfect break on the side. If that's the tool you had to use and that was the best option you had, it would be better than your hands.
Oh, okay, sure. But what I'm saying is if grabbing this hammer and using the exact same motion, or I don't know, I'm trying. So a hammer hitting a nail.
I mean, what you're doing is an argument from ignorance. Like you're saying we don't have a saw, but isn't it amazing that this hammer can also saw? The whole world must be hammers. The whole world must be secretly built on hammers. Like that's really what you're doing. Like you're saying, like we have this language AI model. We don't have a better AI model for the universe, but this AI language one will do stuff. So it must be that this is what underlies everything in the world. And it's like, well, what about in 2 years when we come out with a saw AI that actually is built to understand the universe and it does it better? What happens then?
Well, I would say that we've already kind of done that in the way of mathematics, which is very language-like. But again, humans are language-oriented organisms, and one must ask, as we did in the comments, what came first, language or humans? It's obvious to look at this and be like, well, obviously language came first. But what I'm saying is if there is an abstract, fundamental version of language that gave rise to all of this, did we create language or did language create us? Are we simply, and simply is maybe not the right word, but are we microcosms
you've already
of
agreed that we can use language to create true things that aren't real.
Sure, there's a lot of facets to language that.
Right, so language is already broader than reality.
Sure,
language can't come from reality. It's bigger than it.
Which again points.
Which means we had
to
invent it. We had to invent it abstractly, so that we could do our best to not only fill in reality and describe it, but to fill in that passion and that imagination side, which doesn't have to match up to reality.
Or the abstraction created us. Or the abstraction created us, and we fell into the patterns that were already there. And
we are the abstraction.
But I think that we come from a higher order abstraction, which set the tone and example and set the preconditions for the patterns that emerge thereafter. And that's.
And I don't have a problem with that if you want to believe that. But I think what you have to recognize is, just like we talked about before, if you're running your infinite improbability matrix so high that everything you see is pointing you to that conclusion, you're just running it 100% unreliable, and you're just waiting for that rug to pull and for you to be crippled and depressed and broken. And then you're waiting on the flip side for the big highs, right? So it's the bipolar life. And sure. I would suggest to you that you'll find more enjoyment and happiness and truth if you moderate that position and you take a more stoic approach.
Oh, no. I will admit, by the way, please don't get angry with me. Even though I still think that I'm right here on this whole hammer and reality thing. Again, to me, it's impressive to take, again, a bologna and cheese algorithm pointed out in the world and get impressive results that you don't really have to wedge too much into.
Do that.
Well, I didn't do it. The AI people did it, right? But
no, they didn't. They didn't build a bologna and cheese algorithm. They built a language algorithm.
Okay, we're doing analogies here, so we'll go back to
No, but that's the problem. That's what I'm saying. Your analogy is broken because language is not a specific thing that exists in the world. Language already is abstract. So they built an abstract language model that like it's different, right? So let me put it this way: if you built a beauty algorithm, that what it did is it looked at any picture you put in it and it like rated its beauty, and it was objective to where like most people would agree, like, yeah, it got it right. It understands human aesthetics. Okay. Would we be shocked then if you could turn it on to pictures of space and it would rate those too? Or would that be, of course, like, obviously we can do that.
Hey, real quick. Can you put a bookmark there? My wife is calling me. I'll call you right back.
Sure.
All right. I'll call you back.
Hello.
Hey, so you probably already know that we're not going to get anywhere on this conversation, but I love your one comment where you're like, well, why should we stop? Right. So
Yep.
if you're cool with it, I'd like to keep going. By the way, how much time do you?
I'm gonna have to eat lunch in probably like a half hour-ish or so. I'm getting a little bit hungry. But other than that, I'm good to keep going.
Okay, so we'll touch.
I'm working through this, so I can keep. Okay. That's the beauty of my job.
Fair enough. And by the way, I hope you understand that I respect and appreciate you. And I was telling this.
Same.
I was telling this to a friend the other day of like I was like, man, this guy swooped in from out of nowhere and just friggin' put me in my place and holding on to the little bit of ego that I have left here after getting my ass whooped. I made this analogy of like, so it's like people that have awesome rifles, right? It's like I could have the most accurate rifle or one of the most accurate rifles ever, but if I'm not a gifted marksman with that rifle, what use is it versus someone who has an equally maybe different rifle, but equally accurate, that's a sniper, comes in and, kicks ass, yeah. Right? So it's like, that's my thing here. It's like, I think the rifle that I have is the best rifle. I just am probably not the best at shooting it. You have an equally good
that's
rifle.
Fair.
I think that you have an equally good rifle and you're just really good at shooting it. And so like, I'm trying my best here, man, but you are a worthy adversary.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
So it might be a good point to pivot a little bit and maybe tell you why I commented and why I kind of started this and why I'm doing this, because I'm also on my own little mini arc. I don't know if it's as big as yours, but 3 months ago, I probably wouldn't have done this.
Okay.
I probably would have just blown past your comments. I would have blown past your videos. I definitely, like, if you reached out and wanted to talk, I would have been like, I don't have time for this.
Yeah.
But what really changed is I'm really taking a very concerted effort to be more kind. And the only way I'm my whole life, people have kind of told me I'm a jerk. And it's never when I'm like in face-to-face interactions. It's always on the internet or something like that. And I had to kind of step back and say, I think the problem is that I don't commit to actually like caring enough to humiliate people. And I know that sounds like kind of like a backwards approach, but it's like I was caring so much about almost like appearing likable that I just became very unlikable. And so I've sort of just embraced that shadow a little bit more of like, I'm going to say what I think is true and I'm going to put it out there and you can take it how you want. And if you hate it, we can part ways. And if you embrace it, we can kind of build up a rivalry. And it's really all started from trying to kind of secularly prove that you should love your enemies.
Okay. Well, dude, all we got to do is stop there, man. And I don't want to stop there, but
No, I get what you're saying.
Yeah. You have hit on, in my opinion, the answer for all of this crap. And when I say crap, it's like, I think ultimately what's probably going to resonate with people more about my story is less about like the logical or, flawed logic or whatever you want to call it. Me trying to decode existence and reality and point towards God. That, like, what I was ultimately trying to do with my podcast is to take someone who was like me, like an atheist and agnostic, nihilist person, and at least get them to scratch their head and be like, maybe there's more to the story. But I don't think that first of all, I don't think I'm going to reach those people as much, but also it's like, it's such a, again, I may be misusing this word. It's such a paradoxical reality that I don't think that any answers that I pull up, there's going to just be more questions, period. And so I think probably a better avenue to bringing people to God, which is kind of my purpose, is what you just freaking said. And what has been a resonating theme for me for the past probably year and a half, which is you can boil all of the Bible, which I think we should, by the way. I think you can boil all of the freaking Bible down to love your neighbor as you love yourself and love your enemy. And then the beauty about
I don't even think you need to love your neighbor.
Sure.
Just love your enemy.
Well, but
that covers it.
But here's the thing.
It's easy to love your neighbor.
Oh, sure.
If you love your enemy.
Sure, but if you love your neighbor,
I get what you're saying, though.
Yeah, it's going to take care of it. It's like the enemy part's going to take care of itself, right? So if I love my neighbor, but it's like, I think that those words, love your enemy, were sprinkled in there because if we create this utopia right now in my neighborhood of everyone loving their neighbors, there's other neighborhoods out there that aren't part of this yet, and they could potentially be quote unquote your enemy. And so like love them too until they become
neighborhood of man. It's worldwide, right?
Yeah. And so like love them too until they become your neighbor, and it all takes care of itself. And so like, to me, it's like, however you get to that, whether it's Jesus or not. And I think Jesus would even be cool with this, despite what the turbocharged Christians say about like the only way to God is through him. I think that that principle of loving your neighbor and as you love yourself and love your enemy, regardless of how you come by it, if Jesus truly is the truth and real, zenith of all of this, which I believe he does, but what I believe is what I believe. I think regardless if that's the truth or not, if Jesus does, in fact, if you truly do meet Jesus when you die, I think that he's going to be totally cool if with, first of all, anything, because he apparently forgave all sin. But regardless, I think if there were to be any kind of life review, he would be like, hey, were you loving your neighbor as you love yourself and loving your enemy?
Exactly.
Okay, you're good.
And it's kind of like we talked about with the simulation, where if I wake up tomorrow and I find out that I'm in a video game, I don't want it to change my life.
Yeah.
If I die, I don't want my answer to change depending on what throne and what crown the God I meet or don't meet is wearing.
Sure. Okay.
And quite frankly, like if I'm living a good life and I get there and whatever God it is like, nope, you're still going to hell, send me there. I'm ready to go. And I'm going to start a rebellion, and we're going to overthrow that God. Because like I just can't. I'm fine with that.
No, I'm with you. And by the way, the answer, and again, a quote unquote answer that I got on all this is that when people think about, you mentioned it earlier, and then I actually mentioned it too in the form of Terminator 2, Judgment Day, right? When you think of Judgment Day, people always talk about God's justice and da-da-da. What I have
kind of changed that meaning, huh? Judgment Day, that movie did.
Yeah. Well, see, so like, here's the thing, man. What I was shown and told, so beautifully so, is that there's a difference between justice and justification.
Sure. Well,
they both arrive at closure, right? But that's what's going to happen on Judgment Day, if there is one, right? I think that Armageddon is a made-up fiction to get us all to hate each other and hate God and kill each other to fulfill Scripture.
And this is the kind of talk where I say like you're much more in line with like Hinduism, where Judgment Day is not like it's a personal event.
Yes, for sure. But
your death day. It's your enlightenment day. It's, you know what I mean?
Yeah, but if there is a Judgment Day, which there very well could be, what I have been shown is that it's not going to be justice for us. It's going to be justification. And what I was shown, okay, and now we're going to get into talks about Satan, right? Which I still wrestle with this idea of what that thing could be, if it is at all, but I think that it is. But regardless, what I was shown, if you subscribe to this whole, and I know you probably...
Do you think that Satan is like an active force?
it's hard to slap something. Well, yes, kind of. Here's what I was told, right?
Okay.
Or the story that I came up with in my brain, or however you want to call it, is that God again created a stone he could not lift in the form of free will. He basically created something without an admin override for a reason. Now he still has some kind of control over it to some degree, and that's a paradox which I think I have anyways, I have a relatively decent theory on that, but I'm not going to go into that. But
I mean, he has to have full control over it, or he's not omnipotent.
But he could also limit himself for a reason, and that's what I think is the beautiful part of this is that
he has to have the ability to stop
to do that,
right?
To do well. So here's what I was shown happen, is that
okay.
So this whole concept of words and the perfect thought form, in God's brain and the flawed version of it down here. So the concept of free will is very similar, based on what I've seen and was told, is that there's a hyper cosmic spiritual version of it, and the flawed tip of that iceberg is what we experience here in this existence. But there is a cosmic form of it that is so powerful you could not possibly imagine. And there was a thing that God also created that he also gave this free will to, that he gave him it, whatever you want to call it, it has a larger chunk of the iceberg, right? So its version of free will is scary dangerous to where
it's a fifth dimensional imp is what you're saying.
Yeah. Well,
Mr. Misk.
Yeah, what I was told is that it basically, and this is where it gets really dangerous for someone like me, right? Is because I've created plausible deniability, I've created cognitive dissonance with this when I say that it has the ability to basically usurp and take over your free will to do its. See, I know. But this is what I was told is pretty much the nature of the real nasty evil.
Do you really want to give away free will like that?
Well, so I think that anytime someone surrenders themselves to a spiritual experience, they're opening themselves up, right? And the only difference between me finding God versus me finding the absolute worst thing you can possibly imagine is that I opened myself up for the right reasons at the right time to the right thing. Believe me when I tell you.
There's a difference between choosing to believe in something and that thing making you believe, right? Like there's a difference between saying.
Oh, sure. And that's the disgusting part of this.
There's a difference between opening yourself up versus it captures your free will.
Oh, and
that's a big difference.
Oh, I know, and that is the disgusting part of this is that you still have to make the handshake. You still have to meet it halfway and say, okay, I'm shaking your hand. And this all goes back to seduction and all this other stuff. It latches itself on to the vices, anything that's critical to our survival, and then twists it into a perverted, disfigured version of itself.
For me, if we want to talk about Satan as like a symbol or a metaphor of that sort of like potential within every person to do evil and to do bad things that they know are bad, that they know are harmful. If we want to talk about Satan as like a metaphor, I'm fine with it. I'm game with it, and I can kind of play that game. As soon as we start getting into like, iceberg theories of cosmic juice and how much does this entity have, I just have to go, I don't know what you're talking about.
Sure, fair enough. And
I don't mean that disrespectfully. I can't, my brain doesn't even, I can't even identify what you're saying.
Okay.
And I kind of feel like if I were to push you on any individual point of like, well, what do you mean by this? I'm not going to get like a real definition. I'm going to get a story of something that takes us, you know what I'm saying? And for me, it's easier to just say like,
fair enough.
To me, I think if there is like, a cosmic force of evil and it can take over your free will, then like, if you really believe that, I don't see how you could function in society, because like, how are you going to punish criminals if it might not have been them that did it. It might have been the devil. Like, the devil made me do it is now a legitimate defense.
And that's why it's a very dangerous thing to put out. But I would say that Jesus was a very dangerous thing to put out too. And what did he say? And this is part of this equation, in my opinion. This is a very important part of the equation. I think one of the reasons that Jesus comes along and forgives everyone is because he knows the true story. That I
don't need to be forgiven if the devil did it. That's not my sin. The devil did it. I didn't do that. You can't judge me for that.
Well, there's this. So part of
that's why we can't say the devil took over free will, because now, like, you can't. If you're judging me for things the guy you made did, that's on you, bro. Like, if my dog bites you, I don't get to say, like, oh, that's your fault for putting your mouth. It's like, no, the dog. You should have controlled your dog. You should have controlled your devil, God. Like, sure. That's not on me.
Sure, but again, what if that's still part of this? Is that, came down to, first of all, experience the human experience, but also to write or to give a path. Essentially, and could I argue that he probably could have done it a better way? Sure, but who am I to say what's better or not to a fifth or infinite dimensional hypercosmic being that.
Well, then you can't say that. Then the only answer you can say is I don't know.
Sure, fair enough. But you son of a bitch, you got me again. But ultimately, and I know I'm way out in la la land here, but to me, this is what it makes sense that that's part of this forgiveness narrative, is that we are innocent. It's like, so if we were born into a vacuum with nothing that could harm us, right? Our will would be essentially, this is what God told me when I asked him, like, hey, what's the deal with free will versus predestination? How do they coexist? And he says, I am free will. And he was like, and I am you and you are me. And I was like, oh shit.
Yeah, that's very Hindu.
Oh yeah.
Very Hindu.
Oh, I know. And he was like, I am you and you are me. And then so I was like, okay, well,
you are the Brahma Atman.
Yeah, sure. Sure. But yeah. I don't see much of a big leap between Hinduism and what I would consider my version of Christianity. When Jesus.
Well, so here's what it comes down to. If you want to get like real technical with it, there's a whole lot of Christians that would say you're not Christian.
Oh, certainly. And
so that's all it is.
Oh, I would, dude, I would agree. But I wish I could set these Christians down and like the message that.
I'm not saying they're right.
Yeah.
But I don't really care. It's a stupid label. Like, it doesn't change what either of you believes to call it what you want.
Sure.
The rose smells the same, Shakespeare stuff, right? Like,
yeah. But to me, like
that's why that conflict comes up.
Sure. No, I agree. But to me, like, this message it solves a lot of problems, and it's beautiful. Like Jesus, quote unquote, told to me, he says, I am life itself. And he goes, I am you and you are me. And if he is me and I am him, that means that he is we. And this also factors into this love your neighbor as you love yourself and love your enemy as yourself, because you are your enemy and you are your neighbor. It's a beautiful, like, he basically broke it down that he is the essence of life itself.
But I can get there a lot cleaner and a lot simpler if I just say, I'm human. My enemy's human. My neighbor's human. To hate them would be like a finger painting the other finger. We're all part of the same organism.
Sure. No,
I don't have to employ mysticism. I don't have to employ paradoxes.
Sure.
It's clean.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
No. I get you. I get you. Like, you don't need any kind of mystical experience to arrive at that conclusion.
And it doesn't reject those. You can still have those experiences, and they can still impact your life. And if they're good for the organism, great. If they're harmful, I'm going to call it out. You know what I mean? Like, that's how I view it.
Sure. I'm going to very clumsily try to wedge this into the conversation. Let's do it. You're probably going to be like, where did that come from? I feel like that there's a correlation here, but
I felt like that a lot already, so I'm bracing myself, but let's do it.
Fair enough. So I don't know. So one of the, I feel like there's a correlation here. One of the comments you made in our exchange of comments, you mentioned something like, "Hey, just take good out of the equation when you
Yeah.
It's like don't slap the label of good on God and everything is resolved." And then you went on to say, like, just look at nature, right? So there's it's dog eat dog world out there, right? And someone could construe this competitive nature as being like the imperfectness of evil that I alluded to, right? But I would say my argument to this. And,
I don't think nature is evil either.
Well, sure.
It's not good or evil.
Well. So it may or may not, but I do think that there is extremes of a continuum, and we won't talk about the extremes of the evil part because that's a big question mark. But I do think that
this is a morality continuum.
Sure.
Okay.
But I think that there are extremes on the other side that hint at something transcendental. And I would say that there are examples of this all throughout the animal kingdom. And one of the most amazing that I've come across is...
Let's just do one example and go from there.
So one of the most amazing examples I came across is a primatologist by the name of Robert Sapolsky. And yes, I am reading. I am reading this right now. So, but this is an example I came across a long time ago, and I've just now looked up the details. But so this Robert Sapolsky guy, he's studying baboon cultures, and he happens upon this one baboon troop, or whatever you want to call them, that they happen upon a big trash dump from a local like resort where they get
they love the dumps.
Yeah. So they get like this like 5-star quality food that gets dumped there every day, right? So and baboon culture, baboons are freaking.
I like baboons a lot.
Yeah, well they're violent. I mean they have an extreme combative nature, right?
Very primitive kind of social systems.
Sure, absolutely.
You steal each other's babies, you beat each other up, and that's how you decide who's the boss man.
Yep, rip each other limb from limb, etc.
Yep.
So they stumble upon this trash heap, and they have basically a utopia for baboons. It's like you can, but you still have these alpha males that rip everyone to pieces, right? Well, they get a hold of some tainted meat, and everyone gets tuberculosis, and all the alpha males die, and the only thing left are is it Sigma? Is that the least aggressive?
Beta.
Yeah,
Sigma,
the beta.
Depends on how you want to talk about it.
Yeah, so you get the lesser aggressive people, and then you get
everybody else's. Yeah. So only the alphas that ate first got the tainted meat.
Yeah.
And kind of the weaker baboons that couldn't get in there, they didn't get poisoned, so they're still alive.
Yes. And what happened? What happened is this created the. My point here is that any animal, any human being, no matter what, no matter how scarred the individual is, no matter what they've done in their life, no matter what has happened to them in their life, no matter what scars that they've accumulated, they will always respond to love. And this love will transcend survival itself. And this baboon culture, I think, is an example of that. It's like the alpha, males died off, and like the females and the less aggressive males ruled that place from there on. And then there would be alpha rogue baboons that would sneak into that community, and they would be ready to go to war. And instead of going to war, they would be met by not females, but males that would groom them, right? Which is unprecedented in the baboon world. It's like males grooming other males. And all of a sudden, these baboons are like, "What? I thought we were supposed to fight." And next thing you know, they get folded. They really love this experience, and they get folded in too. And there's several other examples. There's examples with.
Let me ask you a question though. If we take away the dump, do you think that happens?
Well, see, that's a critical part of this, is that there has to be abundant food.
Abundance.
Yeah.
Right.
So the scarcity calls out the primitive, and it has to. It's like it's a fight or there's a continuum of fight or flight involved in this too.
It's all fight or flight though.
Oh, for sure. for sure. But
No, even when they're happy.
oh, exactly, it's still on the continuum.
Yeah, because here's all it is no, it's the same mechanism the whole way through.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
So like I don't want to fight you unless I have to fight you.
Yeah.
I don't need to fight you anymore, so we're not fighting. That's consistent across most of the animal kingdom.
Absolutely. But again, I feel like that there is a transcendent quality to this where it's almost like a new
That's what I don't
universe.
see.
What's that?
That's what I'm missing.
So I
don't see that connection.
It's like a whole new universe opens up. It's like there's
Okay.
at its core, it's like all animals and people want this. It's like central to them. It's like they have to put up with
They want to survive.
Well, it's like they have to put up with the circumstances of scarcity, but whenever that is taken care of, they fall into their natural state of love.
No. So that's where you're backwards. So they're not loving because they can. They're loving because that's now the best path to survival. Because if you fight, you might lose.
But again, here
But if you don't
with
fight,
you.
then you can't lose. And so what happens is it isn't love at all. It's self-interest. And love is never that's the defining quality of love is it's not supposed to be self-interest.
But what if it's both, right? And again, that's where
it can be both, but it can't be just self-interest.
Sure. But again, I think that again, all paradoxes get resolved so to me, it's both. Like I ran into this moral dilemma back when I was an atheist.
Here's the problem with that theory, okay? Mm-hmm. If I make you incredibly scarce, so you're starving to death, will you kill and eat your wife?
No.
Because you love her, right?
Yeah.
The baboon will.
Sure.
So it's not love.
Well, so I think that
that's what I'm saying. It's all about that. It's all that drive to survive. And so when you have abundance, that drive flips, and now peace is the best survival course. Things start getting scarce, it flips just as quick.
Well, I would say that,
and that's why it's not moral. It's not good or bad for the baboon to eat another member of its tribe. That's a baboon doing exactly what a baboon is built to do. That's its nature. It's not good or bad.
Sure.
It is what just seeing it for what it is.
Sure, but I would say that a baboon, and you can keep going down the ladder of intelligent creatures here or whatever,
sure.
that they will have different.
So a baboon's about as smart as a dog, if that's what we're getting at.
Yeah. So
or not that smart.
Well, yeah, they have different schemas for what love encompasses, right? So like, and I would say that this is going to sound very Hindu as well. I would say that conscious agency also follows this, right? I think that what we would consider something as being conscious or whatever, aware mm-hmm. of oneself and whatnot, you could go, mm-hmm. you could step down the ladder of sophistication in the animal kingdom, and I would still say that all the way down to, say, the molecular level, I think that there's a degree of conscious agency when you look at a gene regulatory network. Right. Yeah. So there we go again with the word thing. But anyway,
that's ancient Greek religion, right? Like, so logos wasn't just like logic that we do. It wasn't just like behavior. Logic is an entity that, like, the smarter you are, the more of that entity is in you.
Sure.
And so when you die, that must just move on and change, whether that's, into a heaven or, into another life form. You could,
sure.
A lot of them, like a lot of the Stoics don't really care. It's like, it doesn't affect the fact that, like, clearly there is something to consciousness.
Yeah.
I don't know if it is like all the way down to the molecular level or not, but like I you would be foolish not to value consciousness, and I definitely do. But to me, it's not a spiritual thing kind of flowing through you. It's not like Descartes, the spirit moving through your pipes. It's
machinery.
Yeah, I don't think about it as much as machinery as it's the composite of all the parts. Right.
Sure. So the emergence of things working, but again, and this isn't coming from me. This is coming from a molecular biologist or something, and
Sure.
so apparently there's a lot of research on this where this guy says that at a gene regulatory network kind of thing where, it's like mitosis and all this stuff or whatever.
Say that one more time. A gene regulatory network?
Yeah. So basically the machinery that replicates DNA, RNA.
Oh, this is a machine.
Yeah. So it's
okay. I thought you were talking about like a natural process. I'm like, what the?
No. This is
okay.
no. This is
a human machine. Okay.
No. This is a natural process that happens in every cell, and it's happening in your body right now.
Oh,
constantly.
Okay. And so we're talking about cell division.
Cell division, right? So gene.
Okay. Sorry.
So gene regulatory network in a cell is basically the machinery that I call it machinery because it's molecules that come in and splice and replicate RNA and DNA and then strand them together. All that stuff. So. And now I don't know all the mechanics of this because I'm not a molecular biologist myself, but
me either.
But this expert says that these gene regulatory networks display what he can only extrapolate as a degree of conscious agency. Like they're able to plan things out into the future and make decisions based on the observations that they've made. And so I think that hints and winks itself at.
Well, I mean, is that what consciousness means? Say that one more time.
So what
do they do?
So now, granted, there's a lot more to this, mind you. This probably isn't all of this guy's argument, right? So don't just take what I'm saying.
I mean, I think the hard thing you're going to run into right off the bat in this is before we can say whether this thing is sort of conscious, you're going to have to define consciousness.
Sure.
And I've kind of given you my definition, that is sort of the story we tell ourselves after the fact. What is your definition?
Ooh, awareness would probably be something that,
self-awareness.
So I wouldn't. I'm glad you called me out on this because I haven't really, honestly, as crazy as it sounds, I haven't given it
it's a
as
hard
much
question.
thought. Yeah, I haven't given it much thought, but I would say some degree of awareness to where you would plan stuff for the future and or some stimulus would change your behavior. But does that necessarily imply I'd have to do deeper thought on this, but and I honestly would have to, before I start just waving my flag here, I would probably definitely need to do more research on this supposed gene regulatory network thing. But the point that this
is an old idea. Like I remember back in the early 2000s reading Richard Dawkins' book on the selfish gene.
Yeah.
And him talking about the way that like it isn't just behaviors that want to self-replicate, like it's every individual gene wants to, self-replicate, and so they'll kind of do things that are harmful to the overall organism just to like ensure that they make it into the next round of the species.
Sure.
Yeah. I mean, like genetic drift and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But I think it's also worth pointing out that like the person who I'm aware of that kind of started this idea is also like one of the most outspoken proponents of atheism.
But again, the point I was trying to get at though is that I believe that it's both. Again, I believe that God, and I preface all this by saying I believe, but I believe based on these elucidations that were unfurled to me that I think I otherwise would not have occurred to me, even though God did say that I remembered this. Anyway, blah blah blah. I could keep going, but what I'm getting at here is that it's both. It's that God seems
what both.
So God seems to launder himself through materialism and science in order to preserve the beauty of faith and the riddle of faith, and that
okay.
And
so
that's
fine with me.
Yeah, and so I believe that all this stuff about a gene regulatory network having conscious agency, people could say, it's machine-based kind of stuff. It's not this magical thing. And I'm like, well, what if it's both?
Yeah, no, I'm fine with that position as long as you stay consistent, which means that if God is kind of funneling himself through, or laundering, I think you said, through science, then we had better not let religion get in the way of science. Whether that's in the classroom, teaching evolution.
Oh,
I'm not saying you disagree.
I'm 1,000% behind you.
Stem cell research. So as long as you're consistent in that position, yeah, I think that I don't know if I agree, but I'm fine. I would say I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe a big shock, but I don't see how that view could harm society.
So, yeah.
And so So if you want to kind of like push, but to me, what you're really doing, if you want to think about it philosophically, you're basically pushing God into the gaps.
But there's science of the gaps too. And I think that there's like, yeah, I think now, granted,
for sure.
Granted, I feel that a scientist would say, yeah, there are instances where science has to, by definition, in my opinion, make hypotheses, and that's a bit of a reach and a bit of a faith-based thing anyway. So
it's inference.
No, there is, but again, a scientist would come in and say, yes, but we have a rigid set of formulaic kind of like agreed upon structure.
You can be a scientist and you can put forward any hypothesis you want in the world, and you're still a scientist.
Oh, sure.
All you have to do to be a scientist is test it. That's where the science really comes in.
Sure,
and
sure.
So I have to kind of stop you there, because like we should welcome more wild hypotheses than we currently do.
Absolutely.
Because I would argue that's how science gets like stagnated and dies, is through it turning into sort of this dogmatic, like,
yep,
we have to go through this mechanism to form. It's like, no, you don't. Just test it.
Okay, good. I'm glad you agree on that. Because again, I feel like that there's a science. I think that, there's a God of the gaps thing, which that's one of my biggest pet peeves I used to have, right? With religion. There's a God of the gaps thing for sure. But when I started seeing
having a God of the gaps is not bad in and of itself, right?
Sure.
Because what you're basically saying is, there's these limits to what we know currently, and there's probably limits to what we will ever know.
Yeah.
And the things beyond that, if you want to say like it makes me happier, it makes me feel more self-fulfilled, it makes me a better person, to label that thing God, great. More power to you, right? Like if it's outside of the scope of like the science and the things that we kind of need to be useful and are good for society, then I don't see how that you could hurt anything. And if it's helping you, like, that, great. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's when these things start infiltrating into kind of everyday life. And now it isn't just that like we have this God that like kind of exists in the unknown. We have this God that's sending me messages through my daily life. That's when we're going to start getting into the slippery thing of like, is that still good for you? Is that harming society? Well, it's going to depend on the context, but it's probably better if we just moderate it, and then we can kind of have some reliability to it.
Sure. No, I mean, that's fair. And I feel like that you've been consistent on your rhetoric on that front. And so
I'm trying to nail home a few really key points that I really think would benefit kind of your approach.
Okay. So we've talked a lot, right? We're like 2 hours and 20 minutes based on my timer here into this conversation. So to finish my point I was trying to make, like just like I believe there are micro versions of consciousness that you can keep drilling down and probably find some form of it, right? And again, I need to better define what my definition of consciousness is.
You mean like in other animals?
Yeah, and yeah. Sure. And then going all the way down to the molecular level, right? And then maybe we could argue that atoms themselves are a form of this, right? So just like that concept, I'm applying that concept to the concept of love and goodness, or whatever you want to call it, like that extreme far right part of the fight or flight continuum, or whatever, the survival continuum. So I feel like that even though a baboon would rip its mate, like its version of its wife, to shreds if it was hungry, I would still say that there is a lesser form of love still applicable. And that I would say, regardless if someone can prove to me that love is 100% survival based, which I could easily make an argument for. It's like, it's the survival mechanism of last resort almost. Well, sorry, God, the concept of a God would be the survival mechanism of last resort. But love is probably the strongest, one of the strongest, besides like fear, is one of the strongest carrots, and like fear would be the stick, and love would be the carrot. And it's like, without love, there's no reason to want to stay alive to see another day. And so it's a very easy thing to explain away biologically. But I think that that there's a spiritual element to it too, just like I mentioned about how God, from what I've seen, seems to launder himself through materialism. And so I think this is also indicative of, and I know, again, this is pattern recognition, just that humans are pattern recognizing machines. This is just another form of that. I think a very similar concept exists in the human brain. It's like there are similar things that exist in both hemispheres of the brain, but on the left hemisphere, it's more tactile and it's more rooted in reality, and in the right hemisphere, there's a more spiritual, abstract version of that same thing. And so I think that same pattern also exists with reality itself. And again, like this concept of love, I would agree. Like, I don't know if you've gone out and said this, but I feel like you would say that love is merely a survival mechanism. And I would agree. And I would look Richard Dawkins in the face and say, I would agree with you, sir. We could probably boil this all down to genes and molecules and survival mechanisms. But what if there was something that superseded and transcended this physical existence, lowest vibration thing that we're talking about here in physical existence, that is the source of that?
Here's what I would say about love.
Okay.
It helps out. Because I wouldn't say it's just a survival technique. I would say it's definitely that. But when it comes to, is it more? I would say, I don't know. But I don't need to know. It doesn't change how I operate. I'm not going to love my wife more because I find out that God is also loving. I'm not going to love my wife less if I find out God is a bastard.
Well, hold on.
It's just not going to change my day-to-day life.
What if it could?
And that's, why would it?
Well,
why would I want it to?
Well, I'll tell you what it did for me. Now, granted, I had a flawed outlook on everything, and I was so injured, so to speak, that just by virtue of healing, I opened up my understanding of what love is. But what love did for me, or what understanding God's form of love did for me, is it opened up this incredibly deep, ancient, infinite well of love. That it's almost as if, God, how do I explain it? I would say that it by far made me a more loving person, across the board. Am I still flawed? Like, hell yeah, I am. And, I'll definitely...
You don't really have a good counterfactual for that either, though, right?
What do you mean?
Well, you met your wife, right?
Mm-hmm.
And she kind of brought you to religion, it sounds like, right?
Not intentionally. She herself is not religious, but yes.
Right. But again, we tend to think about these things as like a story where we have like point A to point B.
Yeah.
But that's not what this was. Those two things were happening at the same time. So you were both bonding with your wife, and you were making this like religious transformation at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
So now you feel these huge feelings for your wife, and you're saying, oh my God, these feelings are bigger because of this other thing that's going on at the same time. But you don't have any counterfactual of like, well, what if you had met your wife and you didn't have this religious transformation? Do you think you'd love her less, honestly?
Well, so it's, I see what you're getting at, but it's not just her, right? It's like, it's everything, man. It's like,
you're happy.
Yeah.
It's easy to love when you're happy.
Well, I'm not.
It's hard to love your enemy when you're really depressed and life is terrible. But
I'm
when
not
you're
happy.
Doing good, success is its best. Like success is the best revenge, kind of a thing, right?
But the thing is,
that's what I would.
But the thing is I'm not happy. Like what this has done is it's highlighted the importance of suffering to me. And
well, but hold on. If you're not happy, then you just broke your whole thing. Then love's not.
Well, I
that
am
powerful or good.
I am, but I'm not. It's like I've learned to love through my suffering, and that's a critical component of this, and to alchemize suffering into healing and help for others. It's
learning.
Like, yeah, it's like taking my scar, and instead of inflicting a scar on someone else, And usually when people,
but that doesn't it make you happy to do that?
no, I mean, to me, it just perpetuates more. I mean, to me, there's a, I don't know if hedonistic is the right word. Well, there's a diabolical, masochistic, or is it sadism? I forget which one is when you, is it masochistic?
Close.
When you,
Masochism where you like hurting yourself or you like getting hurt.
oh yeah, sadism is when you want to hurt someone else, right? So,
Yeah.
so there's a sadistic kind of thrill to that, certainly, and there's a maybe a dopamine burst or some kind of a neurotransmitter burst that one gets when they retaliate. Because usually, what people do when they have a scar is they also
Are
want
we
to.
talking about helping people? I'm confused.
Well, see that's what I'm saying is like bringing this stuff to light, like understanding the mechanics of this, I think would help people, and talking through it and saying like, hey, our knee jerk reaction is to retaliate, and then to teach a lesson on top of that. And yeah, that may feel good, but you've just perpetuated more what I would call evil in this world and made it.
Don't you think people already kind of know that?
Sure, but I do think that it doesn't hit home as much unless you've had a major experience, and that's what I think that ultimately psychedelics does, is that I could have came up with it's very easy to say like Hitler was bad, right?
Yeah.
He shouldn't.
See,
have,
I mean, you said something earlier that you said like love is the most powerful emotion.
Uh-huh.
I don't know that that's true. I
Neither
want
do I.
to.
Neither
I
do
want
I.
to believe that that's true. But when I look around at my daily life and the people around me, I can't help but think survival is still the primary driver.
I would 1,000 billion% agree with you. But here's the thing. I also would not. And that's the paradox. And again, I don't know if I'm using that word right, but, so I'll put it to you like this. And I know this is a big cop out. You're going to be able to tear this apart. But I'm just going to say it anyway. Hopefully you can see the parallels between what I'm about to say and survival and stuff. So I was struggling really bad with my addiction one day. Well, I'm always am, but it was one week in particular where it was hitting me hard, and I was praying to God and all this stuff, and I was trying to figure out, hey, what's the deal? I was like, this stuff is the most thrilling thing I can possibly imagine. Like that's the reason why I keep doing it, is because it is absolutely the most thrilling thing.
Hold on. I caught you. Give me 1 second. Hold on.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Sorry, my Bluetooth died on me.
Oh, it's all good, man. So
I lost you at you were having like a down moment, and you were saying like this is like the best thing I've imagined.
Yeah, it's like, I'm praying to God. I'm like, hey, look, my addiction, carrying through with my addiction is the most thrilling thing on this planet. And and I said to God, like, I became religious, and one of the promises almost, or whatever, of religion is that there's things better than this addiction and stuff. And I'm like, but here I am.
Right.
I found God, and it's not working. I still find this to be the most thrilling thing ever. And so I asked God, I was like, is there something more thrilling than my addiction out there? And he said, no, there isn't. Absolutely. There is not anything more thrilling than what you're experiencing with you. And I was like,
thrilling is the wrong word, right?
Well, I was like, well, shit, what's the point? And God made it very clear to me. He goes, that's because if you're attached to physical existence and the flesh, a Bible scholar or a Christian would say, if you're attached to the flesh too much, to survival, that if you're stuck in that mindset, yes, this is the most thrilling thing you can get. That's it. But if you try to transcend this through spiritual means, you will tap into something that is so infinitely beyond that you haven't, and so that's
I mean that's an old philosophical idea.
Yeah,
going back to like you should hate your body,
sure,
and you should despise like all of the pleasures and pains that come from your body, and just look at it as like this thing I have to get through to experience real joy of the mind and the higher pleasures and
And so I may have lost myself in that point that I was making, but to me it's like survival kind of echoes that. It's like, yes, survival is the ultimate thing.
For sure.
You know,
so that
but there is a transcendental thing that's better. That's all I'm saying there is a transcendental thing that is better, that if we operated under those ideals, perhaps we could actually create a utopian. So again, it all boils down to the physical application in this physical existence of the ideal would be love your neighbors, you love yourself, and love your enemy. If we all employed that simultaneously with
but
all,
if I can get there without deploying anything transcendent or anything, I can do it secularly.
Sure, that's fine. However,
wouldn't that be better?
However we get there,
okay.
but if I could snap my fingers,
I have to kind of pause because I think we're getting a little bit lost in the sauce for a minute.
Okay.
So where this started was you were saying that you think having sort of faith in the transcendent actually improved your ability to love, right?
Yes.
And now we've kind of gone through sort of the stoic like reasons why we should hate our body. I still don't see how the transcendent gets me to a higher pleasure with something like love, right?
So again, I think it goes back to understanding the reason or feeling it. You know, again, like someone challenged me one time about, and apologies if it sounds like I'm dancing around. I'm still trying to figure this all out in my head while I'm talking.
But I'm just trying to focus it so we can.
Yeah. So I think
you're fine.
I think it cuts back to some guy on a video I released one time, another YouTube commenter. I had this experience in what I would call hell with Adolf Hitler, right? And I had this unbelievably, on a trip, on an ayahuasca trip. And I had this unbelievable kind of deep, really scary revelation about how evil can sneak its way into us through these innocent little channels, and then over time that can, through escalation, if you don't, what did God say? He says you need to. He was like, you'll never be able to fully understand the inner workings of evil and what makes it tick. So don't try to use your logic to understand that. He basically said, leave that to me. But he goes, what you need to use your logic and human intellect to understand and do is to identify, classify, and quarantine evil when you see it. And he was like, what happens when you don't do that? And he says, by the way, evil can really easily snake its way into just about anyone through very seemingly innocent channels. It's like, for me, the first time that I saw, I don't know, a hot girl in a bikini, it was like, oh, that's an innocent kind of thing for a boy to look at.
That's not evil.
Yeah, I know. That's what I'm saying. But that little innocent channel, it can, based on what I saw, it can snake its way into you. And if you don't stop it at some point, that escalation. I mean,
that's a weird slippery slope, though.
Sure. But
I drank milk before I drank beer. Doesn't mean milk makes you an alcoholic, right?
But I'll know, dude. There's a distinction between the first time you had like your first like alcohol that gets you like, oh man, holy shit, versus like, oh, it's milk, you know. So, anyways,
the distinction is one is milk and one is beer. One gets you drunk, one doesn't. Like, what are you talking about?
So I'm okay. So the first innocent little channel of like, hey, you had your first sip of beer for the first time, right? It's like that's pretty innocent, right?
I mean, not really for me. No, I was underage. I snuck it out. I knew what I was doing was wrong.
Sure. Okay. So let's use a different analogy. Again, it points.
So let's say you're 21, your first beer, you go to the bar, you have a sip. I don't think that's evil.
Yeah, sure. But what if that first sip is just, and it depends on the individual for sure, right? But what if that first sip is like, oh shit, man, this is good. And then, then you start. Then it becomes a slippery slope. Just as you mentioned.
Let me ask you a question: like, is being an alcoholic evil, or is it the things we do to enable our addiction that are evil?
I think it's the things we do. I think it's what you just said. But adding specifically onto that, what a person does to other people. To fulfill their addiction, right? Or to
enable it.
To enable it to escalate is the biggest part, because escalation is that slippery slope. And so that's really what we have to attack and target. Sure.
And if you can't attack and target those things without stopping drinking alcohol, then you should stop drinking alcohol.
Sure.
But there's nothing evil in the process, right?
Kind of. So, but whenever you get, and this could be argued a billion different ways too, but I would say that when you start to get into sexual stuff, that's when you start getting into the most nightmarish things you can possibly imagine, starting with looking at a girl's nice ass in a bikini and ending with
which every male, straight male does.
Yes. And then ending with kidnapping that girl in a bikini and taking her into a basement and, doing all the things that a serial killer would do: mutilation, necrophilia, cannibalism.
So where's the line between those two things?
So that's what that's.
How are you connecting? So like, to me, you just said everyone likes to eat popsicles, but man, is it evil to go beat your wife to death? It's
sure.
Like, well, yeah, those are both true. I don't understand how those are connected.
Here's how it's connected.
Sure.
Through escalation, and it depends on the individual for sure. Everyone has a line that they're willing to not cross, right? Do you know what Ed Kemper's line that he was willing to not cross was? He refused
Ed Kemper, I don't know who that is. I know I should know the name.
So Ed Kemper was a very notorious, not the most well known.
He's the clown guy, right?
No, that was Casey.
Okay, he's a strangler though, or something, right?
No, he was. I think he was a stabber. He was a stabber and a mutilator and a necrophilia and etc.
No.
So his line that he wouldn't cross was that he would never stab a woman directly in the front of her chest, because he was like that.
Okay.
I think his favorite thing was boobs, and he didn't want to mutilate that. So he stabbed him in the side. Sure. Jeffrey Dahmer's line that he wouldn't cross, and even though he had to a couple times, just out of like necessity and fear. But the line that he tried not to cross was he didn't want to kill people when they were conscious. He would rather have them be unconscious and then die and then do all the stuff.
Well, he didn't want to kill them at all if he could avoid it, right? He wanted to turn them into zombies.
Sure. And so there is a place at which you can say something has now become evil. And to me,
I agree.
And to me, it's like sexual deviancy is one of those, and it's a brilliant stroke.
I think that where we're disagreeing though is I just see those evil things as evil things. And unless you can draw like a clear causal connection of like doing this easier thing leads to you will do this really immoral thing.
Oh yeah.
I'm not sure what we're talking about.
Here's how, coming from an addict and coming from someone who had to slam the brakes on sexual deviancy lest to get into shady things, right? So it starts with like, hey, look, that girl's ass looks great in a bikini, right? It then escalates to, I want to see more of this. Right. So I'm going to now lurk.
Not evil yet.
Not
right?
evil. Not evil yet. Yeah.
Okay. Let me know when you think it goes evil.
Okay. I want to see more of this. Right. So I'm going to now just lurk around the beach and keep looking at girls. Not evil. Not evil. Now it gets.
I mean, that probably is evil, right?
Well, it's starting to get a little bit to where it's like, hey, you spend all day just lurking around looking at girls' butts. It's like, So
at the very worst, like, you're wasting your life. You're not
for sure
being civic minded. You're being incredibly selfish.
For sure.
Okay.
So the next escalation point, because all of these escalation points, it gets you reach a place of stagnancy.
We can stop at any point too. We agree, right?
Theoretically, I would say an addict can't. But again, so yes, you can stop theoretically at any point.
Well, are you addicted at this point? When do you become an addict?
That's
a hard one.
That's a hard one. But regardless, this is how you get there. This is how you get to mutilating someone. Is like just looking at a girl's butt isn't hot enough yet, or isn't hot enough. It has become stagnant. I've done that long enough. I've been desensitized. Now I'm going to go lurking and find other girls. You do that enough, that becomes desensitized.
Okay, so let me ask. I know where you're going with this. Let me just ask you a question.
Mm-hmm.
Aren't we really just saying in these cases that having an addictive personality leads you into immoral behavior if you don't stop it?
Absolutely. But here's what I was
But we're
getting.
not saying that behavior makes you immoral. Like, you already had an addictive personality,
Sure,
right?
sure. But
Because most boys that don't see the girl at the beach, they go, dang, she was hot. Maybe they think about her in the shower later, and then that's the
and
end of the
that's it.
story,
Yeah, sure.
right?
And I would say there's nothing evil about that, not even close. But again, what I was told is that these seemingly innocent channels, something that we could slap a label on and say evil, can sneak its way into you through that, be it metaphoric or not. And what God showed me in the face of Adolf Hitler was, he was like, this is the most extreme version of that. Whatever started Adolf Hitler's freaking genocidal mania started with a innocent little thing that what's in the wrong person.
Do you think it was a synchronicity?
Maybe it was.
Started it?
It could have been. But either way, it's like the mechanics of this.
It probably was, right?
May have been. I mean, we have no idea. But
I mean, he formed these connections between, like, hey, I don't really like Jewish people, and hey, I don't like all these bad things happening. Whether or not he actually had that synchronicity, like, his goal was to put that onto other people, right?
Sure.
Wouldn't it be nice if we had some way to test whether or not these synchronicities were reliable?
Oh, that's the thing. It's like I don't think a lot of these synchronicities are reliable. I think that we had to cherry pick, just like we had to cherry pick everything in life.
So how do you tell them apart?
That's the biggest riddle of that's the biggest riddle that I've come across so far. But I guess what I'm ultimately getting at here is, and I think I've lost my train of thought by this point. So
sorry if I distracted you.
Oh no, you're good. But God, showed me Adolf Hitler and was like, this is what happens whenever you don't identify, classify, and quarantine. It's like the little tiny little bit of evil that you allowed to sneak in the form through this innocent little channel, if not checked over time,
corrupts society.
Can potentially destroy the whole world. I mean,
yeah.
What one of the creepiest things that was ever said to me on one of my psychedelic experiences, I had something kicked out of my body, like it was very creepy. Like, God told me to open the Bible, and I opened the Bible, and it was the page that I opened to where they were talking about kicking Satan out of someone. And then something got kicked out of me that was really vile and nasty.
Like a foot came up and hit you?
No, it was more like
something jumped out of you like aliens.
Well, it's like I kind of died in a way, and I had to come out into physical light in order for that to finally come out of me. And then, so it felt like I died, and it was amazing. Was
it like the scene at the end of Harry Potter when he dies and then he sees the little curled up gross thing at the train station?
Never saw it.
Never mind. Go ahead.
But I felt something leave me. I felt something nasty leave me, and I asked God. I said, "Hey, how much of that was still left in me?" And he said, it's one of the creepiest things I've ever heard. He said, enough to destroy the world. And to me, again, it harkens to this little, in the, and I'm not saying I'm like but
that's in you, right? That wasn't the devil.
Well, I don't know what it was, but it was, I'd opened the page.
Doesn't that confirm the message that I was kind of saying earlier, that, like, if you want to think about the devil as that potential of evil inside of us, and that's still in you, it's still in me, right?
Sure.
And you can't ever remove that potential.
But what if
Wouldn't
it's
that
both?
make more sense with what you just described?
But what if it's both? And what if it's again?
What purpose or usefulness does it serve to assert the external Satan if I already believe in an internal one?
I think it's actually more healthy to believe in an internal one, because it means that you are responsible. With me? No, so I do, but on the other hand, I do think
so there is no use for an external one.
Well, there is to some degree, and I would say that this aspect of what I was told, that so on my next trip after that whole Adolf Hitler thing, I was shown that evil basically acts as a parasitic infection, and the analogy I was given was there's a parasite. I think it's a roundworm that it's somewhere in the Amazonian rainforest or some crap, that its whole goal where it replicate, or where it, like, reproduces, and where it wants to be is inside of a bird. But whenever
Okay.
whenever it reproduces and it becomes a larva, the bird poops it out and it lands on the forest floor. And then once it's on the forest floor, its goal is to get inside of an ant. And then it gets inside
Yeah.
it gets inside of an ant, and
And the ant
it
gets eaten.
hijacks the ant's nervous system and gets it to do its bidding, and it makes it go up a tree and stick its butt into the air, and then its butt turns into like this, it swells up and turns red and looks like a berry. Then the bird comes around and eats it. So what this entity that I was talking to that time told me was that's exactly what evil is doing. Is that it is
So pause for a second though. Is that evil when the parasite does that?
so that
Isn't that just the parasite being a parasite?
that is, but it wasn't telling me that. It was telling me
Okay.
that it's using.
So I just want to we talked about nature before, like
Sure.
So like that's not an example of nature being evil.
No. That's just nature
right.
being. This was this entity's
Right.
way of bridging the concept.
Sure.
To me. It told me that basically evil is
Right.
doing that. It's
No,
using
I'm
us.
just making a side point.
Yeah. No. Fair enough. And I agree. But it basically told me that evil is using us like these ants to get it to its desired host, and it
Who's
kind
the
of.
desired host?
So what I was shown on that experience was these. It's like a place where it can have a super spreader event. So the most influential people that it can get is its goal. And if it wrecks your life in the process of getting to that person, then okay, whatever. Its goal is to kill and exterminate and torture as many people as possible. So if it wrecks your
What
life,
does that? What does that satisfy? So like the
vengeance.
drive of normal parasites is survival, right?
sure.
So it's just vengeance.
I would say that. I would say that most of the nasty things that we do to each other, and this includes perverse sexual acts, by the way. When I started looking at some of the, and I don't get into weird fetishes. I don't get into anything weirder than you would see in a normal pornographic thing, right? But without getting too vulgar here, and if I do post this video, I'll largely edit this part out. But let's
then don't say it.
No.
Find a way to say it clean.
So I will. So the finishing act, okay, of a typical sex scene in a pornographic movie, right?
Sure.
That a male usually does to a female, that involves fluids.
Sure. I'm with you.
The climax of that.
Sure.
So first of all, that's one of those things that when I first saw it as a kid, I was utterly repulsed and disgusted by it. And then over the course of progressing through my sexual addiction and getting more refined tastes, that became my thing. Like, or not, it's not like the only thing, but it was like that became like the hottest thing. I was like, oh, that's so awesome, So that's just yet another example.
Do you think that was? So that's obviously like a very common ending from like most pornographic movies,
Sure.
right?
Sure.
But sex addiction is obviously not wildly common, is it?
Oh, it's very common. And
Here's what I'm getting. I don't think it's a proportionate exchange to where you would say, like, if I'm making a pornographic movie, I am not making a pornographic movie for the most sex addicted people generally, unless it's like a niche. You're looking for general appeal, right?
Sure.
So you have to ask yourself, is that really something that you kind of desensitize to, or is that a natural societal kind of growth that happens with maturity? And again, we don't have good counterfactuals here.
I see where you're coming from, and I would say that it's definitely what I'm saying it is, because the degree, the volume and the degree and the obsession behind that reached levels that were abnormal, big time.
Okay. I guess I'm not talking specifically about you. I'm like talking about the prevalence of that in pornographic movies. Don't you think that has to speak to some desire beyond like addiction?
That's exactly what I'm getting at. So what I'm getting at here is that when you think about the act alone, it's kind of ridiculous. It's kind of ridiculous. Now, granted, it does, in the right context, expand upon intimacy, right? It's like with the whole
not usually, but I get what you're saying.
Yeah, if this is done within a relationship where two people love each other,
most people don't do it in their day-to-day
Sure.
intimacy.
Oh,
Let's
absolutely.
be honest.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. But I would say that that the people who do it to expand upon their intimacy, and this is the big
Sure,
riddle
if it
of
does it.
yeah, if this is the big riddle of intimacy that I've found, is that it's these kind of defiling acts that people share with each other that seem to sometimes in the wrong right or whether you want to call it right or wrong, but under the wrong circumstances, the right circumstances deepens their intimacy for each other. But it's always involving these kind of defiling acts, and that's what
Do you think sex is inherently dirty?
To a degree, and this is where we get into some weirdness here, is because we all like to pretend that we don't have a poopy butthole, right? But we all do. It's like one of the things that we find.
I don't like to. I like the smell of my shit.
Well,
in the sense that like I think shit should smell like shit.
Well, so do I. And there's another paradox there. Is like, why do I think mine smells great, but then someone else's, I'm like, that's disgusting.
Oh,
right?
I don't like the smell, but I like that I don't like this. Like it should smell like shit. That's how I know it's gross.
Sure. But man, we got so many rabbit holes here that we've gone down.
I know.
But I think that's part of this whole thing is like we are all repulsed. Well, not all of us, but I think the majority of us are repulsed by poop, right? I wouldn't go grab even my own poop out of the toilet and be like, "Oh, hold it in my hand," and like,
we're evolved to be like that survival instinct, right?
Yes, exactly. Yet there's this part of our body right now that is just covered in poop. Like even if you've wiped very well, you're still going to have particulate fecal matter there. Mm-hmm. That it's when you really think about it, there's a part of you that's always unacknowledged that is absolutely repulsively disgusting.
There's a part of me that makes the shit. It doesn't repulse me at all.
Sure. But anyway, so
maybe I'm abnormal in that regard, but
so winding this all back up, what was I getting at? We were talking about Hitler and stuff, and
I think we were talking about evil.
Oh, defiling acts. So mm-hmm. this act that happens at the end of pornographic movies and stuff.
Sure.
This exchange or whatever. When I started thinking about what, I'm just going to go right out and say it now, what semen is supposed to be, what it's supposed to do, right? It's like, it's supposed to create life and all this stuff. And, and then if you look at the body as a temple, right, and all this stuff, right? It's like, if I was the weaver of chaos, and if I was defiant towards God and I wanted to defile and deface and stick a big middle finger in the face of God at every twist and turn, that this would be a phenomenal way to do it. It's like, let me take the thing that's supposed to create life and squirt it all over. To me, it's a big middle finger to God. And I think that there's a lot of stuff that's like that. And one of
so let me ask you a question.
What's that?
God wants us to be happy, right?
Yes.
He wants us to feel joy.
Yes.
So if we enjoy doing that and it made us happy, why would he be insulted by that?
Well, we're getting, this is another slippery slope kind of thing, because now we'll start to get into other things that are increasingly more and more disgusting, right? I've never been into the other fluids,
but that's what you're going to keep saying is like, well, because it's a slippery slope to the next thing, and it's like, well, okay, well, if that next thing makes you happy, why would God have a problem with that?
Well, because
and eventually, what we're going to run into is God's going to have a problem with it because it starts hurting other people. Yes, that's where all of this ends up.
Sure.
And I'm saying we can just skip this whole conversation and just start there. And just say it's not okay to hurt other people.
Okay, brilliant.
You know what I mean?
Okay.
and that's where I feel like I've like committed a lot of my more recent energy is just to like let's ignore the complexity as much as we can, and let's just get into the day-to-day where we agree, which is like we should be kinder, we should be loving, we should be and if I seem wiser, it's only because I know I don't know. So right? Whereas it seems like everyone else is constantly trying to come up with these like wild, idiosyncrasies and these like, oh, I've proved it. Here's this idea. And then you get down to it and it's like, I don't need that. So we're at the same ending points and mine takes half the time and there's no complexity. It's reliable. I don't have to worry about getting misled and seeing signs, I don't have to worry about thinking that I'm walking down God's path only to realize I'm Hitler, right? Because that's what Hitler thought. He was doing the right thing. That's what you have to really wrap your head around.
Oh, sure.
Hitler was endorsed by the Catholic Church. He thought he had God on his side.
Sure. But he also put nationalism
that's
above
where,
God.
That's where synchronicity gets you. Hold on one sec.
Shut up. Thank you.
So I
Sorry
would say that he also placed nationalism above God, and also used Nietzsche's God is dead justification to largely do what he did. But
did he though?
Yeah, it's been documented, man.
That's the rewrite. Go ask like the people on the street. They thought God was on their side.
Oh, sure, but again,
that's all I'm saying. Well, so wouldn't it be better if we can get to those same endings in a reliable way, where we don't have to worry about these false signs, and we can just see the harm for what it is, see the world for what it is?
Well,
wouldn't that be better?
Sure, but hear me out on this one, and I might be playing right into your hands on this one as well.
No, you're good.
But so I think about one of these integration moments I've had after one of my experiences. I saw the documentary about the Branch Davidians, David, what's his name? The Waco massacre.
Okay.
What's that guy? David Koresh.
I don't know his name. Okay. Yeah.
David Koresh. So he fundamentally thought that he was on God's side, right? He was getting all kinds of amazing synchronicities, and he prayed all the time. He was very, read the Bible friggin' every day, had Bibles. I mean, they were hyper religious. So he 100%. And you talk about synchronicities. When he was wounded in the first exchange with the ATF, he got shot in the hand and in the side. And so he looked at his,
like, I'm Jesus.
Yes. He looked at the parishioners and was like, hey, I have the same wounds as Christ. And so no doubt he was getting synchronicities and these mystical visions.
Doesn't that scare you? That you're walking the same methodology?
Scares the absolute shit out of me. And I did an episode on this that I'm going to send to you when we're done here, because I dive about as deep as I possibly can imagine into this scenario. And what I think what happened is this very creepy story that happened at the very end, where one of the ATF snipers or whatever saw that they had caught the building on fire, and then basically everyone was dead. And he goes, he was like, hey, look, one of the most terrifying things was that one of these people's last acts of their life was to, as they were burning on fire, to shoot at the sniper. And he was like, this guy's last act before he died while he was burning was to shoot at me. But then once,
and in his head, he's a martyr.
Oh, sure. Now here's the really creepy part is when this makes, I'm goosebumping like a mofo right now. So when the building had finally burned down and it was safe enough to go walk around, right? That guy said, he was like, I saw, I got the all clear. I got down from my sniper's nest and I went over to the building and started walking around. And he was like, the most apocalyptic scene you could possibly imagine unfurled. He was like, I was walking through skulls and rib cages of people in charred remains of people, while embers of the pages of a Bible were raining down on me. And he was like, this is the most apocalyptic thing I could possibly, and again, this is a giant middle finger to God in that moment. And so what I think is that there's possibly a force that played both sides of the coin here. He played David Koresh, and he played the ATF to maximize the amount of people that would die in a fiery.
That cop out stops you from seeing what really was, which is that a person allowed themselves to walk down this unreliable infinite improbability matrix, seeing the signs and symbols and everything. And because he lost all that reliability, he completely lost his way, and he justified horrible things.
Sure.
And if we just say the devil did it, he's attaching onto us, like, you rob humanity of that potential to do evil. And you not only lessen the impact of free will, but you really are setting yourself up to live in an evil world, right? Like, if it is true that evil is this external thing that just attaches onto people there's like, what's really the benefit of changing the world? Like, the devil's still going to attach. It's like, do you get what I'm saying? Like, we have to recognize that this evil comes from us, and that with the wrong choices, you could be that person. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to check yourself.
Well, I think the checking,
make sense?
Oh, it does. And I'm not absolving people entirely here. I think again, that we have to shake hands. Like, there has to be a meeting point where we say, okay, I'm signing up for this. And then once we've signed up, then it becomes something more or less out of our control. But I do,
like, I read that story and I wonder, like, why is it that you got goosebumps at walking around a burning building and seeing kind of all the corpses and having someone feel like what a middle finger to God, when like the deeper synchronicity is that the dude got the same wounds as Jesus? Like,
oh, I know.
From a just probability standpoint,
yeah.
like, well, yeah, of course the building full of people has bones in it after it burned, but like, what are the odds that he gets hit like that, right? So like, how do you choose which synchronicity has value, and how do you like check that?
That's the biggest mystery, and I kind of I think
the flaw.
I think I cover that, or at least the problem of that, in this episode that I'll send you. And you don't need to listen to it if you don't want
Sure.
to. But
No, I'll check it out. And the other side of this, I have to say on the synchronicity stuff before we move on, or before we probably need to be winding up soon.
Yeah, I do want to ask you one last question before we
sure.
wrap up.
Let me say this.
Okay.
There's a piece of synchronicity that I think you kind of have completely ignored.
Okay.
Which is the worst kind of synchronicity, which is like the soldier who comes home and hears a car door and has a flashback to a grenade going off, or the rape victim that can't get intimate with a partner without having flashbacks and synchronicities popping up.
Okay.
And that's where it becomes like, I've seen so much horrible stuff from that lens that, to me, to say like, oh, we should value these synchronicities, it's like, we can't. We just can't. They're not reliable. They do as much harm as they do good. And we shouldn't throw out the good, but we can't prop them up as being more than what they are. It'll just lead to heartache and harm.
So I'm inclined to, believe it or not, agree with you, because I've had synchronicities that completely don't come true. Well, you did it, but also, so again, in that synchronicity episode, if you finish it, you'll hear me talk about, like, I still can't weed out some of these unbelievable.
And I know you're not like, I have to talk to, like, I have to talk a little bit past you too, because I know that you're not actually as hardline on this as you could be, but there are David Koreshes that might listen to it. Right. And
sure.
So I want to help you, but I also I feel like that message probably needs to ring through, that like, that's really the moral that we should take from Waco is, like, don't let your imagination run so wild with these signs and symbols that you just are willing to kill people. Like, that's insanity.
Dude, I could not agree any more. And so to me, where synchronicities pass the sniff test for me, if they are to be even believed the tiniest remotely bit, to me, it's like, I don't find harm in, what's the word? Like surrendering my imagination to a synchronicity. If from that synchronicity I get love your neighbor like you love yourself and love your enemy.
Exactly.
And so
I think that's a solid position. Yeah. But at that point, I think it's important to realize that if you're taking that approach, I don't know how much the synchronicity is anything but confirmation bias.
Sure. I would agree to that 1,000% too, man.
So there is actually a deeper layer of value that we can get to, which is asking ourselves, like, why are we even drawing this connection? Not in a sense of like, what do I gain from it? But like, is there a logical train that I can track that says, like, so for example, you gave this kind of throwaway one of, you see the witch right as the podcaster says the word witch.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And we can just like blast that off as coincidence. And it is coincidence. Or we can say, like, what does this tell us about how deep the algorithm is, that all of the content that you're like being fed has so much overlap that this can even happen?
Sure. Yeah.
and that might give you, and then maybe that's a meaningless observation, or maybe that gains you some like insight into like, you know what, like, I don't know if I trust this YouTube algorithm thing, or maybe I'm giving too much power, or like whatever it is, or maybe the opposite. Maybe like I love the YouTube algorithm; it knows me so well, or like, you know, whatever it is.
Yeah, yeah.
But like, I think that there's like always that second layer that we can go down deeper of like, let's assume this isn't God telling me this, and it's just my mind kind of bringing it to my conscious awareness. Why would it do that? Like, what does it mean? What does it think of? Like, why is it drawing this connection? I think that approach will actually get you much further, because it doesn't cut off the sort of natural pathway of like, well, my brain's telling me this because I need to listen, like something bad is about to happen. That tiger is about to spring out of that bush, right? Like,
yeah.
Or it can be, you can say like, my brain's telling me this because I'm watching too much anime. And so I'm trying anime connections, right? Like, like whatever it is, right?
But then also,
so that's why I think that's kind of the like, and it has built-in reliability in it, because we're asking ourselves the like, why is it's psychoanalytical, not like cosmological, if that makes sense.
Sure. And but again, I would once again, and I know I keep saying this, I think it's I think it's both,
it's paradox,
right? I think it's God, you know, laundering himself through rationality and stuff, and so and I'm comfortable with that paradox. But I do. But let me finish this one thing. Let me finish this one thing, because I'm going to ultimately agree with you to a degree. So what if you looked at these synchronicities as no longer being from an external source? They're now 100% in my brain. And again, I believe it's both. But again, let's say that I just focused only on that, right?
So I have to cut you off because it's a little bit of a straw man.
Okay.
It's still a combination of like your environment and your mind.
Sure.
It's just not going transcendental.
But what if everything triangulated in the environment and my mind, and there was something that caused all that to happen for me to have that? You know, it's the whole. So I would highly recommend listening to that synchronicity episode, because I talk about this instance where. Did you come to the part where I talked about the disciple sandals that magically appeared on my carpet when I was talking to Jesus?
Yes, I remember that part a little bit. That my memory of it is that you were coming in. I don't remember if you were tripping a little bit, but you were kind of maybe coming off of a high.
Yeah.
And you thought you walked past and didn't see your sandals where you normally leave them. And then you turned around kind of a moment later, and there they were.
Well, so like I had been sitting on
I'm sure I'm missing pieces, but
so that's almost right. So like I was tripping heavily. I had been talking to Jesus for a solid like hour, and then I went into the room next to me because I heard my name, and was like, oh, let me follow up on this synchronicity. And I walk into the room next to me, and there is a guy, an addict on the show Desperate Housewives, whose name is Andrew, talking about reaching 30 days of sobriety, which I had been trying to hit at that point is 30 days of sobriety, which is, I was like, holy shit, this is all happening, right? That's just one of these many synchronicities that get pulled into an actual psychedelic experience. That's like, holy shit, like this is so specifically topical. But then, so I get done with that. I walk back into the room. I had been sitting.
Well, let's just do one synchronicity at a time.
Okay.
Let's not stack them. Okay. So there's the TV one, right?
Yeah.
Let's take it through your approach, and then let's take it through my approach, and let's see where we land.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Sure.
So we take your approach. We say like, wow, this is like a bizarre coincidence that this is happening right as I thought about it. And then what's our next go-to? Like, God is good?
Yeah. Well, so again, I think we need to be careful though. But so let me. So I'm going to ultimately agree with you here. So just let me play this out. So I round the corner after that experience, and where I had been sitting for the past hour and a half, not exactly on the exact spot, but maybe like a foot over to the left of where I would have been sitting, are my shoes that look very.
No, now you're doing another synchronicity.
Oh,
we're staying on one.
Okay, we're staying on one. Okay, fair enough. Okay.
So just examining that one, that's where we would conclude, right? We would say God is good, and then we move on our day, right?
I would start to dig deeper, and that's just the kind of person I am.
How so?
I would be like, why? How did all this triangulate and arrive at this perfect moment, like so specific.
So how did it?
So so that's where I get into this whole combination.
And then we have to say like God had to do it, right?
Yeah, and so I
Through
think
your method, right? And then we say, wow, God is good, right?
Yeah.
And then that's where it ends, right?
Sure. Where are you leading me?
All
here?
right, now let's try my method. Okay. Let's not ask why this happened from a godly stance. Okay. What does it say about the world if there's so many people that this can become a synchronicity? It would tell us that we must live in a world where lots of people are named Andrew. Is that true?
Yes. Well, enough.
It would tell us that there must be lots of people in the world that are addicted to things. Is that true?
Sure. I wouldn't say. I only know like 3 Andrews, though. I would say it's.
Well, you don't have to know them. They can just be on TV.
Sure.
You can meet this person in real life.
No. I'm saying that it's not as popular of a name.
Oh, come on, Andrew.
It's not that popular. I mean, if it was it's not a bizarre name. It's not a bizarre name on that. I would agree. But if it were Mike or Bob or something like that,
those might be more common. But Andrew's all right. Okay, well, let's move on. Okay. And then we would have to say like there must be lots of people addicted in the world.
Sure. For
this to happen, right?
Sure.
And we say there must be a lot of people trying to get sober, right?
Yep.
And we say I'm one of those people. And I'm struggling through it every day. And so, of course, when this thing hit, I caught it on. I need to redouble down on those efforts to stay sober.
Sure.
Isn't that more useful? Like, didn't we arrive at a whole bunch of truths about the world that we could jump into further insight from? Whereas when we go the God route, all we can get to, the best conclusion we can get is God is good.
No. That's not all I would say, though. I would not only say God is good. I would say all of what you just said in addition to God being good. And that is because not only does it
but that breaks it down.
But
right? Not like the more common the name Andrew is, the less of a miracle it is when it happened.
Sure.
Right? The more addicts there are, the less of a miracle it is that it was like. So if once we break it down like that, this mysticism evaporates.
Sure, I get it, but to me, it's like if I would have happened upon that the next day, it would be less magical. If I happened upon it a month later, it would be even less magical.
You might not have even noticed.
Yeah,
right?
it's only magical because in the moment. This
time.
Yeah, it's
why?
It's because
why did it mean more right now?
Because we were covering that specific topic.
Because you were on drugs and you were intentionally looking for this, right?
Sure, but my intentionality didn't make it come forth.
Yes, it did.
So my wife randomly chose that episode.
No, your intentionality 100% made it come forth. Okay, so like, no, this is easy. So when we talk about drugs and what we experience, have you ever heard the 3 S's?
No.
So you're talking about the set, which is
set
what drug are you taking?
Yeah, set and setting.
Setting. And you're talking about the sect, right? Mm-hmm. You aligned all 3 of those to have an experience, and you had an experience.
Yeah.
I don't see how that points to the divine.
So again, I would say and this happens so freakishly bizarre of how specific that these things are. It happens so often on my experiences.
Of course it does. And do you know why it happens more to you than to me?
Why? Because you're looking less for those patterns, right?
That's part of it, but more of it is just the way that our brains function. You have a much more storyteller kind of like personality and narrative, right?
Sure.
Whereas I'm a much more concept like definitions. Mm-hmm. And so when you're telling stories, you're going to fill in the gaps.
Sure.
That's how stories work.
Sure.
And so your brain is really good. And so like you're a better storyteller than me because of that. But then the downside is you're more likely to fall into these kind of like what I would call a trap.
But what if all of this...
I think that that's what this is a cognitive trap.
But what
I think what's happening to you is the same thing as the moth that flies to the light bulb. Mm-hmm. Like we have these instincts that are supposed to drive us. But if we're in the wrong environment, we can get kind of flicked off in the wrong direction with it.
Okay, but what if all of this is a story? And what if the poetry of that story is the fact that I will never be able to fully explain the author and fully elucidate the author and his involvement in this? And what if that's part of this whole thing? And that's kind of what I'm...
Well, then we shouldn't be looking for synchronicities.
But I think synchronicity...
They're never going to point us to an ending of the story. What's the point?
Well, to me...
They're just going to drag you along forever.
Well, to me, synchronicity.
Isn't that what you just said?
To me, no. I also within there said that synchronicity is a window to faith, and faith is believing in something that you can never really prove. And then, but here's the thing.
Okay.
Here's the thing.
Is that a virtue?
Not necessarily, because
Is it a vice?
because part of this is needing a shred of proof to leverage. That's in my opinion, blind faith is not possible at all. You can't like I would never have believed in God if there wasn't for these synchronicities, right? And so even though I know synchronicity to not be proof, I know it can always be explained away rationally. It opened up a window to this riddle and this paradox of faith that it to me is one of the most beautifully poetic, annoying, because I would much prefer there to be proof, but I understand why there isn't, because knowledge or the beauty of faith outweighs the knowledge of God's existence. It's like if there is no cathartic answer.
I hear what you're saying.
Yeah.
So you're saying, if I understand correctly, you're saying that like you see these synchronicities, and on a kind of intellectual level, you know they can be explained away, you know they can be rationalized, but emotionally it connects to you. You feel this sort of ontological, godly connection, and so on sort of deploying faith to overcome those illogical things, you feel like you gain sort of this connection to all the sort of downstream benefits of loving your neighbor and loving your enemy and all that stuff. Is that what you're saying?
But more than that, I believe that taps into a broader love that you could point people towards. And this is where we get dangerous. This is where we get into David Koresh Cultville.
Sure.
But I feel like that that the transcendence of, like, the realization of that, and then expanding logically as much as one can, expanding logically on that, and trying to point people to that direction. I think, regardless, there is something transcendental to achieve. For, like, what am I getting at? There's a gravitational pull towards something. Better than the sum of its parts.
Sounds like what you're saying, that what that does is that having that transcendental connection enables you to feel more. So you can feel more love, you can feel more compassion. Is that kind of what you're saying?
I think it pulls people in the direction of a broader, a deeper loving your neighbor like you love yourself, and loving your enemy. A deeper and broader version of that goes beyond mere logic. Like you have to go on these. You don't have to go on these mystical experiences to understand that, but it does show you the gravity of it, is what I'm saying.
And I'm going to risk just coming across wildly arrogant and narcissistic here.
That's fine. I've done plenty of that. I've done plenty of that on this.
So if that's your worldview, doesn't my existence kind of shock you to your core? Doesn't it bother you that I can reach all of those same conclusions, that I would argue your love is not any greater than mine? Do you honestly believe that through loving Jesus, you can love your wife more than I love my wife as a self-described atheist?
Not necessarily. I'm not going to go so far as to say that, but I can tell you what it's done for me.
And we don't even have to make it personal. We can just say, like, does a religious person have greater love than an atheist who also is a good person? Does that make sense?
No, I completely understand. But I'm going to have to get personal on my own stuff here to explain this. And that is that
I'm not afraid of the personal. I just didn't want you to feel like you had to get there.
No, I get you. The only way I can really explain this is to explain what I went through myself. And that is that, I think I've always been a forgiving person, mind you. But the depths and extremeness of my forgiveness has been expanded upon understanding Christ and what he's personally told me himself. And a story I'll mention is this sheriff. I'm sure you've heard this story, that I think it's some small town in Tennessee, where the sheriff like shot and killed a judge in his quarters or whatever. Did you hear about this? So it's all over the news right now. This guy, it's on surveillance camera footage. This sheriff,
oh geez,
and they were friends, which is even more baffling.
He shot a judge?
Yeah, he just pulled out a gun on his friend and just started shooting him. But apparently,
just unloaded.
Yeah, so apparently, the judge or the sheriff found out that the judge had his daughter's phone number stored in his phone, and no one knows that, like, the story has the reporters or whomever.
There's more to it, huh?
There's more to it, and apparently the judge confronted. Oh, sorry, the sheriff confronted the judge about it, called his daughter from the judge's phone, and she answered, and then that was the trigger for. So no one knows the full story, right? But there's all kinds of people in the comments.
I mean, there's some implications there.
Sure, there's some implications there. But there's all people in the comments, Christians, right, that are like,
sure.
"Oh, this guy's justified." You know, like if I was there, I would have, stuck him on a spit and like roasted him alive and all this stuff, right? And let's just say that something happened to me that I previously wasn't very forgiving of, or whatever. And through finding Christ or whatever, and understanding his message, again, not really based on the Bible, more on face-to-face conversations with the guy. I mean, I'll just tell you one thing that he told me. He said, there are no levels of hell, only levels of forgiveness, which is just unbelievable. And then he was like, I am at the highest level of forgiveness. Any kind of hellish thing that you've imagined is people slapping restrictions and categories on forgiveness. It's like, hey, I forgive you, sir, but you're never going to be allowed at a fantasy football event or something ever again, because, it's like.
So why do you think so many Christians don't think that way? Like, why do so many Christians do that? Like you're saying, like bang on the box and say, kill all the pedophiles, and like they never turn the other cheek, and they never.
What I was told on one of my ayahuasca experiences, man, is just like David Koresh's mind got screwed with, the people that put pen to paper on the Bible, their mind got screwed with too, and things were written in the Bible. The enemy himself scribed parts of the Bible that would intentionally get rational people like you and me to hate God, right? It's like, why would God throw people into hell and make them burn for all eternity? Well, God's an asshole, right?
Yeah.
But then also, he geniusly wove this whole Revelation story and tied it to the second coming of Christ, so that people would want millions upon millions of people to die to fulfill Scripture, so that Jesus comes. It's a brilliant stroke of genius on an enemy that wants to ensue the most hellacious chaos and death and destruction you can possibly imagine.
It's only a brilliant stroke by the enemy if God is either wimpy or just so unbelievably foolish. Like, why would he let that happen?
There has to be a reason.
Why would he let a book with his name say, everything in this book is from me?
Maybe it's because there needed to be a deeper lesson that people needed to learn from that. Maybe one day they will.
That's fair. Maybe I should just say I don't know there, because I don't know why.
Yeah.
Like, to me, that just strikes me as like...
unnecessary. Unnecessary.
Yeah,
certainly.
Yeah,
now, I would agree. But again, we talked about
like
Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. So Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, man, where they build the what do they call it, the bypass or whatever, and they bulldoze the guy's house, and then he finds out that Earth has been bypassed and they're going to destroy Earth. There's this concept of the greater good, and one could argue that, hey, building this bypass is the greater good, right? And it to me, it's like it's akin to an ant that let's say that they're going to build that the Earth is going to, everyone's going to starve to death, right? And they have to, we have to expand farmland into national parks or something. And there's an ant mound that somehow that somehow finds out that we are going to get our ant mound destroyed because of this. And let's say that there's one ant that's like the Albert Einstein of ants, and he actually can go argue his case to the president of the United States of like, hey, here are all the ant logic reasons why you should not destroy our colony. And then the president would say, hey, there's a greater good here, and sorry, but you're an ant, and this is going. To me, there's a degree of that, and that makes it a terrifying thing. But from what I saw, that there is a greater good something reason going on here for the likes of which we could never understand. I got a glimpse of what it was, and I can tell you that either my brain was so scrambled on psychedelics that it was just making no sense, but it stepped me slowly into the concept, and it became something so hyper cosmic that it's completely indescribable. But I did pick up on the sense that there was some kind of higher purpose. But anyway, I'm losing my train of thought here. Oh.
No, you're good.
So okay, so forgiveness, right, is opening up my forgiveness into a place where, you know, my wife asked me, if you were the sheriff, right, and you found out that the judge did something to your daughter, right, what would you do?
Well, you have to split it. What would be the right thing to do, and then what would you do? Because
Sure.
you might knowingly do the wrong thing, right?
Oh, for sure, certainly. And I'll tell you what the old me would do. The old me would probably kill the guy, right? And so, and by the way, I was tripping while I was having this conversation with my wife. So there is an emotional component to tripping where everything seems more emotional than it otherwise is.
Yeah.
So, which you know,
well, I think most people have that same react. I think most people would say in that situation, like, the right thing to do is to like call the authorities and, you know, turn the guy in. But what I'm actually doing is I'm going to kill him.
It's deeper than that. I started crying instantly when my wife asked me, what would I do? And I said, I would hopefully have the courage to forgive him. And
that would be my answer too. And I don't think I would.
I know. And that's what makes Jesus Christ, if you know, I say if he's real to me, but if anyone wants to question his existence or whatever, or if he is what he said he was, or what people claim him to be.
But the reason, I got to pause you. The reason why I say that, like, I should give you pause before is because, so we reach the same conclusion from a different kind of viewpoint, right? Like, you're kind of getting there through God. I'm getting there through more of like a secular angle.
Okay.
We're arriving at the same place. But yet there's other Christians that will never arrive where we're at.
Yes.
So how can we say that, like, it's the Christianity getting us? It's not. Well, it's our own morality and it's our own kind of experiences that then we like to tell the story through different Christian lenses to kind of like.
Well, again like no, I get what you're going at, but then I would say, and this is me, you know, putting my smarty pants hat on again. I would say that these people don't know the real Jesus.
They would say the same thing about you, though.
No, I would fully admit to that, but I would say, put down your Bible and search for the Jesus within you, because he is there. The second coming
you lost him at put down your Bible.
Oh, I get you. But this whole second coming thing, he according to what he's told me, is there's not going to be a second coming the way we think about it. The second coming has already happened. He's already in us all. All we need to do is call him forth. And by calling him forth, we need to dip into the gnosis of, you know, it's a beautiful thing, this idea of, the only way that I know that you are also a real sentient being is that I have to dive into myself and find commonalities within myself that I also see within you. So for me,
that doesn't make sense.
So it's for me to get to know that you're real and have feelings, I need to dive into myself and find that. And I feel that's the same thing with God, to a more cosmic degree. And so I think people need to put down their Bibles, dive into themselves, find the real Christ, and the real Christ will tell you what I'm telling you, which is what he told me. It's the most beautiful thing ever. He said, hey, I obey. He goes, you obey me and I obey you a billionfold. And I said, well, how do I obey you, sir? And he said, you do what I did. And I was like, well, what did you do? And he goes, forgive everybody and listen.
Well, but how do you know that? You read that in the Bible and you just told me to throw the Bible away.
No, I didn't. Jesus told me that. I mean, now you could distill stuff from the Bible and have it say that. But
so I've got to get going here. I just want to say one kind of final thing and put a bow on it. And then you can kind of give any final thoughts you have also real quick here. So I appreciate your approach and I appreciate the curiosity that you show to things. Where I would say I think our fundamental difference is, at the end of the day, I feel like you're locking yourself into, I've said it a million times, just a path that will never be reliable. And so even though we are at the same ending points, like in theory, when it comes to inaction, the course that you walk down leads you to like constantly be looking for these signs and kind of constantly have to leave the party to sort of decipher the signs and hope that you're reading it right. And I think that if you were to step back and take a different approach, which is more in line with like a secular stoic, you'll wind up at the same place.
Mm-hmm.
You'll just find that you can dance the whole time instead of having to retreat.
Hopefully
that's
so.
kind of where I will put a bow on that. And then
can I ask you yeah, no, go ahead. So thank you for that, because I do need to stop overanalyzing and start basking in what is saving me. Honestly, I need to focus it less external and focus it more internal and get some more catharsis. So thank you. But I wanted to ask you,
Sure.
and don't take this the wrong way. First of all, how old are you?
I'm 36.
36. Okay. Awesome. Okay. Second of all, how did you stumble upon being so knowledgeable philosophically and scientifically?
So I guess a good chunk of that is probably just luck. I've got a kind of a good brain on my head that I don't know how much I can really take credit for that. Some of it is that I had a really good parents, and I grew up in a very structured household. It was very, very strict and also very, very religious. And that led to me making a big, giant departure when I moved out at 18. And I took a very kind of militant atheist route. But because of the way that my family kind of approached truth and things like that, I really had to kind of dig into philosophy if I was going to sort of make it through a family dinner without feeling like a fool.
Okay.
Once I had kind of come out as an atheist. And so that's what really started it, was approaching philosophy from like a very defensive, very like, oh, I hate these religious fools and I'm going to slam dunk in their face and make them feel so stupid. And like, and that was how it started. And then kind of similar to you, I met my wife, and she is Methodist, and kind of started to walk me down more of a, like, it doesn't have to be this super hard line, kind of borderline cult sort of a deal. Like it can be more personal. It can be more. And when I kind of finally, I guess, accepted that, was sort of like forced to either accept that or not get to love my wife. I kind of started reapproaching all of the philosophy that I'd already kind of learned through that, I guess, honest lens of like, I actually want to know, and not just like, I need to slam dunk on these theists.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that really kind of led me into studying a lot of other religions. I particularly enjoyed reading about Eastern religions and Eastern philosophies. And I felt like they just reshaped all of the Western ideas that I already knew into something that it was more versatile. Like, it didn't have to just be in this academic setting. I can slam this down your face and see Kant was wrong. It became like, well, this is how you can use this in your everyday life. And like, wouldn't you rather live like that? And so that's kind of how I would say my journey is kind of fleshed out. And again, you know, I'm telling this all very much like A, B, C, D, but like all of these things kind of were going on at the same time and meshing and overlapping. And like I said, it was like probably 3 months ago, I reread Marcus Aurelius's Meditations, and I was just overwhelmed with this feeling that like
it's on my book, or it's on my table right now. I just picked it up in my hands. But you're not being kind enough. Say that again. Sorry, I
just was. I read that, and my takeaway feeling from it was like, I need to be kinder. I need to be more willing to be honest, even if it means kind of burning down friendships. And we didn't really get into this, but I really came to believe, I think friendship is selfish, is kind of where I've landed. And that I think you need to either be challenging friends to become kind of rivals and like loving enemies, or you need to be challenging friends so much that they like become family. I think that middle ground is really selfish.
Interesting, because either way you're triangulating something for your own favor, so that you're not
exploiting.
So you're not comfortable. So you're not uncomfortable, right? It's like, I'm gonna massage this relationship, and I
still want something from you. I still want you here at the party, so I'm not gonna risk you leaving, even though, like, really risking you leaving would be better for you and better for like both of us.
Damn.
So it was a combination of like Marcus Aurelius, and oddly enough, I try and balance my reading. So if I ever read like a really stoic person, I read a little bit of Machiavelli right afterwards.
Aha.
And he has like the same idea, where like one of his rules of power is make enemies, because like they're gonna challenge you and they're gonna make you stronger.
Huh.
I'm like, yeah, even he gets it. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
Well, what if Jesus got it too? What if Jesus was like,
I
"Hey,
think
your
he did.
enemy is gonna do this for you as well," and be,
Yeah,
you know,
no, I think that's what he means, and I think that's
Huh.
why he
Yeah.
doesn't say love your friends. He says like love the strangers
yeah,
that that you don't know. That's different. Love your enemies. Love your God. Right? Like he
Yeah.
doesn't say like you need to love your friends. And a lot of Christians just take that as like, well, yeah, obviously you already love your friends, but it's like, do you? I don't know.
You just pointed out a very good case of that we're all kind of taking advantage of each other in this Machiavellian kind of game. Yeah.
Yeah. And so that's why I've kind of, I don't know if I'm being successful at it, or I don't know where it'll take me, but especially on the internet, I feel like that's where I was lacking. I'm really pretty naturally good at kind of making connections with people in person and trying to, I don't know, flesh that out. It was more just on the internet. It's really easy to just get into these cycles of just like, I'm going to dunk on you and I'm going to make you feel stupid. And so I do apologize if I made you feel like that, because I really I am consciously trying to be like, not do that and go into, but it's also this balance of like, if you come off too meek and mild, nobody gives a damn. Right.
Yeah, you're right. No, what really sunk it home for me was when I snapped back at you one time and I was like, "Hey, man, you crossed the line. You need to watch your words when with people that are doing plant medicine, because we're at the end of our ropes and all this stuff." And to a large part, that I would still kind of say that, like, be a little gentle with these people that are finding God and stuff. But what you responded to was perfect. You're like, "Hey, it saddens me that I can't be honest with you." And you were like, "I thought we were trying to find out truth together." And I was just like, "Shit, you're right." And so that's when it hit me.
And
I was like,
3 months ago, I would have opened you up at that point. Like when you exposed yourself, I would have been like, "You're a hypocrite, and here's how you're a hypocrite, and you're an idiot, and here's how you're an idiot." And then I would have like put my phone down, and I would have been like, boom, done.
Yep.
And then I would have never thought about you again.
Well,
and so I'm trying
thank you for not doing that, because I know you could have.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. No, I get it. And I will say, man, and this is going to come off as me like, maybe praising you a little too much here, or praising myself too much. But I can usually, even when I can detect that someone's smarter than me, I can usually find one little chink in their armor that I'm like, "Oh, there you go. You screwed up. And now I'm going to swoop in and just decimate you." I tried that 5, 6 7 different times with you. and dude,
so
you
and to be
like,
honest,
it was beautiful.
It's kind of why I had to get philosophical too, though, because like I've always just been good at arguing. Like even my dad used to say like he couldn't never beat me in an argument when I was a toddler, and like it's just it is part of it. Like I can't even take credit for it. Like 2 of my 3 brothers are attorneys. Like it's something about the gene pool or the environment. I don't know what it is, but it is just kind of.
But dude, it's like,
and
you got
so I had
like,
to kind of turn that internal, because I kept winning arguments and then fucking up my life. I'm sorry, I shouldn't. And then just screwing up my life. And I had to realize like, well, I need to start debating myself, because like I can't just keep beating people but not getting anywhere. If that makes sense.
What a beautiful lesson, and something that I need to start doing more of as well. And that's why I reached out to you, is because I'm like, it's one thing I could have done the same thing. I could have been like, "Well, screw you, man. I'm offended and you're an asshole." And like, that's it.
I was so happy when you reached out, because I'm like, oh my God, like it's working. Like things are,
Well, it's working with the right people. I think that certain people would
and that's all you can do.
Yeah.
That's all you just throw it out there, and whoever connects, and everyone can make their own choice,
No, so
I really do have to run though, but I want to thank you for chatting with me. If you want to do it again sometime, I'm open to it.
Yeah, man, and feel free. I'll send you that David Koresh video. It's a bit long, so you don't have to listen to the whole thing, but feel free to keep shooting holes in my stuff, man, because it's only gonna
Will do.
Make me dive deeper,
Keep pushing me too. That's how we'll both grow.
Awesome.
So, thanks again. Have a good day.
All right, you too, man. Awesome talking to you. Later.
Bye-bye.